My Mafia boss ex offered me an empire. My new man offered me a plate of pasta. For 7 years, I was suffocating in a penthouse funded by illegal warehouse deals, entirely erased from the corporate paperwork. Victor dumped me for a younger girl, leaving me with a $5 million settlement. I used it to start over, finding a man who photographed my healing instead of demanding my obedience. When Victor realized his massive mistake and begged to rebuild our marriage, I had to laugh. The underworld kingpin just lost to a freelance photographer, and he's losing his mind.
Okay guys, let's pause the video right here and look at this absolute disaster. Meet Victor Hale and Elena. For 7 long years, our girl has been living in pure delusion,
Thinking her icy mafia boss husband saw her as a true equal. She literally helped this guy drag his criminal empire out of the mud, believing a fancy anniversary dinner would finally make him appreciate her. Instead, bro walks in and totally destroys her. He wants a divorce and already found a new girl. These toxic bosses always underestimate the crazy revenge energy of a broken heart. You and I are going to unpack this insane drama together today. The lesson here is super simple. You can never buy love from a man who only cares about power, and pouring your soul into an empty person will only leave you drained. Picture this opening scene. We kick things off in their massive penthouse, which is basically just a shiny cage built on dirty money. Elena is rushing around like crazy, totally desperate to fake some kind of normal life. She's setting up heavy gold candles, bringing out the fancy wedding plates they literally never use. All the wildly expensive food is just getting cold. Then we see her staring at her midnight blue dress in the mirror. Let's be real, she isn't getting ready for a romantic date. She's putting on armor to fight for a guy who checked out ages ago. It's a harsh truth to swallow, but forcing everything to look perfect will never a broken relationship. Sometimes trying to make a fake situation look beautiful is just dressing up a dead romance. Notice the sneaky little rebellion she pulls right here. She leaves her dark hair totally loose, which is a massive middle finger to Victor because he's obsessed with her wearing it tied back. 7 years trapped in this mental prison is insane. She starts flashing back to their early days in a dusty Detroit apartment. Back then, bro would stumble in at 3 in the morning covered in absolute mess, and she completely mistook his panic for true love. Now they're sitting 40 floors up, filthy rich, but acting like total strangers. It's brutal to watch, but we all have to learn from this. Going through pure hell together doesn't magically create a healthy romance. It usually just traps the loyal person with the one causing all the damage. Shared trauma is never actual love. This guy is an absolute masterclass in toxic mind games. Starving affection is the quickest way to totally crush their spirit. Helena can't even remember the last time Victor actually looked at her like a real person. By 8:15, that empty chair at the table is just standard behavior. Making her wait is his entire personality now. She pours herself a huge glass of that crazy expensive wine he refuses to drink and just sits on the couch. They used to be partners, fighting side when they had nothing. Now he just tosses her breadcrumbs to keep her hooked and obedient. The takeaway from this mess is obvious. When you let another person decide how much you matter, you'll always end up sitting alone in the dark, waiting for a text that never comes. Out of nowhere, her phone buzzes on the table. It's a text from the boss himself saying he's 20 minutes out. Her first reaction is to type out a little heart, but watch her hands shake, and she deletes the whole thing and just sends a basic thumbs up. That's pure survival instinct, guys. She learned the hard way not to show him too much love. 40 whole minutes drag by while she sits there sweating. Finally, the elevator dings and she slaps on this completely fake smile. Victor steps out looking crisp in a dark suit. You've got to admit, the dude uses his scary vibe like a weapon, freezing the room. Stick with me here because the truth is rough. If you spend your whole life walking on eggshells for someone, you're just going to end up walking away with broken feet. Even in his 40s, Victor looks like a total menace, standing against the city lights. His grey eyes are completely dead inside. Those are the eyes of a mobster who can ruin your life without blinking. Elena gives him this super quiet hello and wishes him a happy anniversary. Watch his face closely right here. You can see one tiny flinch of guilt before he goes full Ice King again. She tells him she cooked all his favorites. Bro literally ignores her, walks straight to the bar, and pours a huge glass of scotch. Then he hits her with the coldest stare and mumbles she'd have to do all this check, but sometimes the brutal reality check, the person, the one pulling the trigger. Being blindly loyal to the wrong person is basically ruining your own life. The light hits his face, and he just looks completely empty. He tells her to sit down, and you can feel the absolute dread in the room. She tries to talk about the dinner, using the food as a desperate distraction, but he totally shuts her down. He tells her to sit again, way harsher this time. She barely sits on the edge of the sofa, looking totally terrified. It's honestly sad seeing a powerhouse woman get reduced to this. Victor just stands by the drinks in, dragging out the silence to mess with her head. Let's look at this moment together, because he's doing this on purpose. He says he's been thinking about their 7 years together. She just nods, panicking. The harsh reality is simple. Never make your small, just to keep someone who is already packing their bags. His jaw is totally clenched, putting up that classic wall of ice right before dropping a bomb. Elena is literally begging him to explain, looking like she can't even breathe. He puts his fancy glass down super slowly, just to be extra dramatic, and says he wants a divorce. Boom. Those words hit her like a freight train. Her entire reality just breaks into a million pieces right there on the rug. She can barely choke out the word "what." Then Victor delivers the final knockout punch in the most boring voice ever, saying they aren't happy anymore. Bro is treating their marriage like a boring business contract. The life lesson here is harsh but true. If you expect sympathy from a literal brick wall, you're only going to break your own fingers. Don't fight a rock and cry when you bleed. Pure panic totally takes over her brain. She starts stammering, asking where the heck this is even coming from. Victor just stares at his drink like it's fascinating. He coldly says it's just the truth. This man completely ignores the massive criminal empire they built together and acts like people just naturally drift apart. Elena is full on crying now, begging to fix things. Then he drops the absolute nuke. He tells her there's someone else. You can feel the room spinning with her. She calls him out for changing machine, but bro has zero shame. He says he wouldn't call it an affair. Drops the new girl's name, Arena. Listen up, because this is important. When a toxic person tries to rebrand their brutal betrayal as just moving on, they are completely out of your life for good. The way he explains this timeline is straight up mental torture. He admits he met Arena 4 months ago, bragging that she's younger and lacks their dark Mafia baggage. Elena is gripping her legs so hard, trying not to fall apart. When she screams at him for doing this on their anniversary, you can see a tiny hint of guilt on his face. He mumbles the date was an accident, but he done. He tries to gaslight her, saying she probably wants to escape too. But our girl finally snaps. She tells him not to dictate what she wants, showing absolute fury in her eyes. The takeaway here is super critical. You can never let the person who ruined everything try to act like it was a mutual decision. Let your anger be the spark that helps you stand back up and finally fight back. Her absolute boss energy finally wakes up and she decides to swing back. Her voice drops super low, warning him never to tell her what she wants. Victor's jaw twitches because he absolutely hates when she challenges him. He sighs and claims he's trying to keep this breakup clean. Elena just lets out this crazy, dark laugh. She asks him how anything could be clean after all the actual blood they spilled building his empire. Bro immediately tries to play the victim, blaming her for acting sad and distant for the last 2 years. But she stands straight up and refuses to take the blame for his terrible choices. Listen, the bitter truth about toxic people is wildly simple. The person holding the knife will literally always try to convince you that you tripped and fell onto the blade. Look at his fancy shoes right here when she walks toward him. Bro actually takes a tiny, pathetic step backward. Under all that scary boss energy, the guy is just a massive coward. She throws all her sacrifices right in his face. She reminds him she was there when he was dead broke, helping him build his operation through pure chaos. Now that he's sitting on the throne, he's throwing her out like trash. She demands he make it make sense, completely furious. Victor just puts on this gross, fake pity face and says she's been unhappy for years. He's literally using the sadness he caused as an excuse to dump her.
Stick with me, guys, because this happens way too often. Remember this massive lesson.
If you build a kingdom for someone who disrespects you, they will lock you out. 7 whole years of biting her tongue absolutely explode in the middle of the room. "You pushed me out," she screams, her voice completely shattering. This boss slowly locked her out of the exact empire she helped him build. "I was your partner," she says, and suddenly I was nothing. Victor does not even flinch. He drops to an ice-cold deadpan,
smoothly saying things complicated and stake higher. Now he is straight up telling the woman who poured blood into his syndicate that she is too weak for the throne she made.
She asks if he thinks she cannot handle his level, burning with pure betrayal. The lesson here is brutal, but so real. Blind loyalty means absolutely zero to an ultra-selfish monster who only cares about what you can do for his next big power play. Let us look closely at the insane framing here. The camera lingers on Vittorio, effortlessly twisting his massive betrayal into a personal failure. The audacity is crazy. He tells Luca she chose to walk away, painting her as the architect of her ruin. Luca stands totally frozen under the chandelier. You can literally feel the scream building in her throat, the desperate urge to shatter every glass in that penthouse. Instead, she stares right into the eyes of the Don she worshipped for 7 whole years, asking when she stopped being enough for him. Vittorio smoothly evades the question, completely untouched by her agonizing heartbreak. Honestly, it is a harsh truth we all face. Never seek your validation from the exact persons who is actively destroying your entire life. Pause on this exact frame with me and study the arrogant tilt of his chin. This boss as orchestrates devastation like a dark symphony, demanding man total control. Luca is bleeding out emotionally, yet she finds one last spark of pure defiance. She straight up asks if his new piece understands the actual demon she invited into her bed. Her palm presses against the freezing window, staring at the criminal empire she helped build for nothing. It is the ultimate tragedy of blind devotion, where you lay the bricks of your own permanent prison. She whispers a deadly promise, reminding him she holds enough secrets to bury him forever. Watch his smug face drop, replaced by a cornered predator. The lesson is crystal clear here. True loyalty should build a solid foundation, never a cage. Vittorio drops his voice into a chilling stillness using that dead tone a Don uses right before an enemy vanishes. He leans in, asking if she is making a threat. Luca totally refuses to blink. She meets his pitch-black stare.
Practically a devoted heart. The realization hits her like...
There is no reasoning with a man blinded by his massive ego. Vittorio clinically pivots to dividing assets, speaking as if liquidating a minor corporate account instead of ending a long partnership. A broken laugh escapes her lips. We can all learn a huge life lesson from her pain here. True survival kicks in the second you accept it, that the person you love so deeply was never actually real. Vittorio briefly looks away, but do not mistake this for actual remorse. The tightening of his jaw reveals nothing but pure irritation that he has to endure her grief. He calls her a strong woman, dropping a hollow platitude to absolve himself of the ruin he caused. As he grabs his tailored coat and heads for the elevator, Luca turns to stone. When those doors part, she drops her dignity, desperately asking if he ever truly loved her. He casually replies that he thought he did. That careless phrase is literally a fatal psychological gunshot. The silver doors glide shut, sealing her inside this sprawling, empty void. The tragic lesson rings out loud in the silence. We have to learn to recognize when our beautiful shared sanctuary is actually just a gilded cage designed to keep us trapped. Stick with me here, because this scene descends into pure tragedy. Luca stands motionless, staring at the lavish anniversary dinner arranged right in front of her. She does not weep. Her mind initiates a cold, silent shutdown. With agonizing slowness, she grabs the heavy crystal goblet and hurls it against the reinforced window. It explodes into shrapnel, sending blood-red wine splashing all over the pristine rug. Anyone else would be screaming their lungs out, but her face remains terrifyingly blank. She is completely hollowed out. The wildest detail is the lighting. Those flickering candles burning perfectly, totally indifferent to her destruction. It teaches such a hush life lesson. The world keeps turning even when our personal universe shatters. We alone are responsible for picking up the broken glass and moving on. She is paralyzed for what feels like an absolute eternity. When she finally moves, it is with the jagged grace of a broken marionette. She starts gathering plates, blowing out candles, and smoothing a discarded coat. It is a tragic defense mechanism, grasping for control while her universe turns to ash. Retreating to the bedroom, she packs exactly one bag. She walks past steamed items and silks, finally seeing them for what they really are, beautifully crafted leashes. Suddenly, her secure phone flares to life in the dark. A message confirms the safe house on 7th Street is ready. Her bold choice leaves us with a really profound truth. Walking away from extreme luxury becomes entirely simple the second you realize those beautiful comforts were only meant to keep you chained up. The secure message is from Marcus, the head of security. Ironically, this terrifying enforcer is the only person in the Mafia who saw Luca as a human being rather than a polished jewel on the boss's arm. Confirming her escape, she lingers at the door for one final glance. The glittering facade of the penthouse falls away, revealing what it always was, a high-security cell draped in silk. She leaves the ruined carpet behind for Vittorio to deal with. Hours later, she turns a rusted key into the lock of a cramped apartment on 7th Street. The profound quiet hits her like a physical blow. There are no guards, no cameras, no ghosts of her past. The sudden emptiness is overwhelming, but it leaves us with a beautiful life lesson. Finding genuine freedom almost always requires us to step bravely into the absolute dark. Pause with me again and let this crazy visual contrast sink in. Luca drops her bag onto a sagging mattress, staring at a decaying brick wall. Safe from the predator's den, the adrenaline fades, and her psychological dam shatters. She collapses, her chest heaving with violent sobs. This is not just the grief of a standard breakup. She is mourning the agonizing truth of wasting 7 years on blind loyalty to a phantom incapable of human love. As she writhes in pain on this cheap floor, Vittorio is likely across the city pouring champagne for someone else, replacing a pawn on his chessboard. The lesson here is brutal but necessary for anyone trying to heal. Sometimes, to truly save your own life, you have to be willing to completely rebuild your broken soul from the dirt up. Exhaustion finally drags Luca into a heavy sleep, offering a much-needed pause. But as morning light creeps into that grimy room, she is hit by the cruelty of waking amnesia. For 3 golden seconds, she remembers nothing about the betrayal. Then the memories crash down on her chest like falling concrete, projecting Vittorio's ice-cold eyes on a relentless loop. Trembling, she forces herself up and faces her reflection in a cracked mirror. The visual is completely unforgiving. Her eyes are bruised with deep grief, her posture entirely broken. The polished lighting of her former Mafia life is gone, leaving only the grim reality of pure survival. Look, you and I both know that healing is never a pretty cinematic montage. It is an ugly, deeply human process of waking up every day and choosing to survive your own total destruction. Stepping into a freezing shower, she aggressively scrubs her skin with frantic desperation, acting as if sheer force could wash away a decade of toxic manipulation. Afterward, she commits a quiet act of pure rebellion, pulling on faded denim and a shapeless sweater, exactly the clothes Vittorio would have despised. Opening the street door, the transition is jarring. Gone are the bulletproof motorcades. Instead, she is surrounded by the chaotic symphony of laundromats, exhaust fumes, and people trying to survive. Walking blindly to outpace her own panic, she finally stops outside a weathered cafe. It is cluttered, noisy, and gloriously unpolished. This moment offers a powerful life lesson for anyone starting over. Genuine, authentic life always thrives out here in the messy reality, far beyond the polished walls of a sterile cage. Crossing into that dusty cafe is an act of pure defiance. Luca orders coffee and finds a corner table facing the exit, Mafia habits dying hard. With trembling fingers, she cracks open a paperback. Her former captor used to banish distractions like that, demanding her absolute worship. As she reads the Mafia shifts. A stranger approaches her table. His posture is tentative, asking softly if the empty chair is taken. The crazy part is he does not undress her with his eyes or assess her value as property. He simply sees a person reading a book. Luca pauses, her breath catching, before giving a forceful caution nod. It is a monumental step toward finally reclaiming her life. Leave us with a vital truth to remember. We should never underestimate the profoundly healing power hidden inside a completely ordinary, respectful human interaction. Look at this. This random stranger strains up and drops his name. Adrian spits out her own name, totally bracing for that heavy, awkward silence she always gets. But boom, plot twist. Adrian doesn't flinch. He just stays totally locked in. He reads the absolute brick wall of tension in her shoulders and smoothly guesses she is fresh to this absolute dumpster fire of a district. He drops a humble story about his own trash arrival just to chill her out. Is still clutching her mental armor, wait for the hid dagger. Instead, this guy delivers the most garbage joke about his acidic espresso and clumsily apologizes for crashing her vibe. And right there, an absolute miracle. Her frozen trauma cracks and she actually smiles. Here is the lesson for you all. Real kindness does not kick the knockdown it down. She just chills on the porch until you are good and ready. For 30 straight minutes, we get this wildly rare frame of no people just existing. No Mafiats, no drama. Adrian hypes up his photography, the garbage weather back home, and his bad knee. But here is the real flex, his absolute restraint. He refuses to poke at her silence. He does not look at Luca like some broken toy to fix or a shiny trophy to snatch. He treats her like an actual human being. When his phone alarm goes off, there are no sudden moves. He just stands up, gives a chill wave, and leaves the offer for coffee totally hanging. No toxic ultimatums. No psychological bear traps snapping shut. He just leaves the door open. Honestly, a massive lesson here, guys. A top-tier connection never demands your total surrender. It just casually invites you to stay. Hold up, let us pause right here and dissect this frame. The camera zeroes in on Luca, and you can literally see the heavy tension in her chest. This is not just a breakup, guys. This is straight-up survival mode against a toxic boss. Notice how she physically deflates when Adrian walks away. But, of course, the universe hates peace, and her phone violently vibrates. A super cold text from Vittorio, and his legal goons flashes on the screen, trying to drag her back into the underworld. But watch the absolute flex in her eyes. She reads the threat, takes a deep breath, and just slams the phone face down on the wood. The Mafia tyrant just lost his leash. It hits us with a wild truth. The exact second you stop feeding your attention to the absolute garbage dragging you down, those heavy chains finally start to snap. Boom! 3 days later, and the vibe shifts to this sterile, freezing blue. Elena rolls into this high rise that absolutely reeks of corporate warfare. Look at her fit, guys. She is rocking pitch black, not because she is crying over a dead marriage, but because she is suited up for absolute battle. This slimeball lawyer, Richard Moss, flashes the most plastic, predatory smile you will ever see. He slides a massive stack of papers across the desk, acting like he is doing her a huge favor. Elena does not even blink at the bait. She completely ignores the files and snaps, demanding to know where Victor is hiding. Her cowardly mob boss husband literally outsourced his force to a random suit. It proves a brutal point. The absolute snakes who completely ruin your life rarely have the spine to look you in the eyes when they finally pull the trigger. You guys have to stick with me on this one. We are literally watching a massive heist go down in broad daylight. Moss leans back with that dead, shark-eyed grin. Dropping the terms of a totally rigged prenup, he throws down $2 million and a joint account with 300 grand. To anyone else, that is lottery money. But against Victor and his massive underground syndicate, it is an absolute joke. The luxury penthouses, the front businesses, the entire empire she bled to build Victor is hoarding every single penny. When she asks about her own companies, the legal trap completely snaps shut. Which brings us to a super important reality check. Never build your glorious empire on real estate owned by a total villain. Because when the turf war pops off, they will boot you out the door with absolutely zero to your name. The camera zooms right in on her shaking hands, and the math finally clicks. Every single shipping lane, every massive real estate deal, it is all buried under Victor and his sketchy shell companies. Moss just stares her down like a robot, coldly dropping the bomb that her name is completely wiped from the official grid. Victor used to feed her this absolute garbage about to keep things secret to protect her. A total masterclass in manipulation just to keep her on a vosh leash. You can literally watch her soul leave her body as the financial abuse hits her. 7 brutal years of babysitting a raging mob boss and running his cartel from the shadows, and she gets ghosted. She fed the beast, and now it is biting her head off. Take notes, everybody. Giving blind loyalty to an absolute monster will only ever get you totally erased from the map. Moss actually leans forward and has the absolute nerve to call this garbage settlement generous. The camera catches Elena grinding her teeth like she is chewing actual glass. This guy gives her exactly 48 hours to review the trap, a totally fake choice in a game she already lost. But watch this boss move. She stands up and ice-coldly tells him to use her maiden name. Just listen to how crazy those syllables sound after 7 years of being mob property. She walks out into the grey city, just floating for 12 blocks like a glitch in the Matrix. Her new spot on 7th Street is literally just a box with a roof totally dead inside. And this is the insane reality of the situation. Just because you finally break out of a heavy iron cage, it does not mean you instantly know how to fly. Starting fresh is an absolutely terrifying drop. Elena is stuck in this absolute nightmare limbo. The old mob wife version of her is dead, and the new one is barely breathing. Then, boom, her phone shatters the silence. It is Marcus, a low-level enforcer from the crew. He asks how she is holding up, and she just deadpans the $2 million buyout, the literal clearance rack price for her soul. She stares at the garbage weather outside,
feeling completely thrown away. But then she drops the old question about the new girl, Irina. Marcus panics and spills the tea.
He actually knew about this insane betrayal for 5 whole months. Talk about a massive knife to the back. It is an absolute gut punch of a scene, but it serves up a super harsh truth. The cowardly silence from the people you call your squad is honestly just a much slower, way more toxic way to get taken out. Look, you and I know exactly where this is heading. Elena should be absolutely wrecking the room right now, but she is totally out of gas, 0 rage left in the tank. Instead, she just asks for the stats on her shiny new replacement. Irina is a 26-year-old bartender pouring cheap drinks at a club Victor owns. She is totally obedient and completely hypnotized by all that fake Mafia flash. Marcus spills that this poor girl thinks Victor is just some intense CEO, completely missing the giant red flags. Elena just closes her eyes, getting a massive flashback to when she took that exact same bait at 27. She really thought her love could fix the mob boss. The ultimate takeaway here is a totally reality check. We always hype up our own foolish and reckless youth and trick ourselves into thinking it is actually bulletproof armor. The background noise totally drops out, and you just hear this heavy, terrified breathing on the call. Marcus is literally risking a mob hit just by dialing her number, all because she paid his sister and her medical bills back in the day. He whispers that Victor is making a massive, catastrophic blunder letting her go. But Marcus is way too terrified of the boss to actually do anything. The guy is just trying not to get whacked. He drops a totally useless line about how she deserves better, which is garbage advice for someone whose life just blew up. Elena hangs up, sitting frozen as the sky goes pitch black.
She looks at the regular people down below. The absolute demons running their city.
The lesson hits like a truck, guys. When you finally break out of a toxic cartel, you permanently lose the right to a boring, peaceful life. Elena gets absolutely hit with a massive wave of jealousy watching those boring people live their lives. She is wandering through the fog like a zombie, and suddenly realizes she is standing right outside the exact same cafe where Kirsten ran into Adrian. It is almost 7 at night, and since Adrian is a total early bird, there is 0% chance he is inside still. Her shaking hand pushes that heavy door right open. Boom, the whole vibe flips. The place is glowing with this chill amber light, totally packed with randoms who have no idea her empire just burned to the ground. And she orders as a basic tea and hides in the back, and but totally confused by her own brain. But listen up, because this is how human nature works. When your whole world completely shatters, your brain automatically drags you back to the very last checkpoint where you actually felt safe. So there is Elena, totally wrecked and sitting alone like a glitching NPC looking for a safe zone. Suddenly, the sad cafe music gets interrupted by this super chill voice. Plot twist, it is Adrian. He is standing in there in this beaten-up leather jacket, rocking a massive camera on his hip. When he asks to crash her table, her high-level Mafia paranoia instantly spikes. But as she actually looks at him, she sees all these crazy human details. A little scar over his eye, some grey in his hair, the rough hands of a guy who actually works for a living. Totally different from Victor and his shiny utes. He cracks a joke about taking photos of miserable corporate types. Pay attention, guys, Mercer, because the life lesson here is absolute gold. True connection in Robson when we drops in, put away our heavy iron armor and just vibe with the messy, unpolished reality of another person. You and I have to appreciate this setup. Adrian gently asks how she makes a living, and boom, instant panic mode. She stammers out a fragile lie about a career transition. Adrian just nods, letting the silence breathe instead of launching a ruthless interrogation. Her mafia boss husband would have pinned her down until her spirit broke, but Adrian just reads the terrified tension in her shoulders. He leans back and casually asks if she is in witness protection. The terrifying accuracy of that joke hangs heavy in the air. Against every survival instinct, a broken laugh escapes her chest, and he smoothly changes the subject. The simple life lesson here is obvious. Sometimes the absolute best medicine for a bleeding heart is a quiet distraction from the agony. Adrian leans in, hyping up a gallery filled with forgotten architecture. He insists there is profound beauty in things falling apart. Pulling up a photograph, he shows off a shattered warehouse bathed in golden sunlight, whispering that broken things are always the most captivating. The camera tightens on Elena, but her heavy iron walls violently slam right back into place. Her traumatized mind assumes this poetry is just another calculated manipulation. She cannot fathom a guy offering kindness without a hidden dagger waiting for her back. This reveals the tragic cost of survival in a criminal empire. The simple life lesson here is heartbreaking. A mind strictly educated by ruthless predators will eternally search for poison hiding inside a sweet offering. Dim lighting casts long shadows across the table as Elena coldly states that human goodness is a total myth. Adrian does not even flinch. He simply suggests she has been swimming in poisoned water for way too long. As 2 full hours slip away, they spar over terrible films and distant cities. You can practically see the rigid architecture of her mind beginning to soften. Adrian slowly strips away his own armor, laying his messy past bare. He speaks of a quiet childhood, parental disappointment, and a completely shattered engagement. He hands over his own open wounds just to give her a safe sanctuary. We find a wild truth in this shadow. The simple life lesson is that pure vulnerability is the only blade sharp enough to cut through a lifetime of defensive iron. Adrian explains the epic collapse of his future. His former lover demanded suburban safety, but his soul craved the raw storm of his art. He says compromise is impossible when two spirits march toward totally different horizons. Elena feels that truth deep in her bones. The air leaves the room when Adrian softly asks if she has ever worn a ring. She violently jerks back, acting as if a sniper bullet just tore through her chest. Adrian sees the terror and scrambles to apologize. Elena holds up a trembling hand and forces her jaw to unclench. She speaks the word divorce out loud, calling the legal documents a mere funeral for a corpse she carried for years. The simple life lesson here is merciless. You must speak the true name of your tragedy out loud before you can strip away its power. Stick with me here, because you and I need to look closely at Elena right now. Watch her trembling fingers trace her ceramic mug, holding it like her only tether to gravity. She spent 7 agonizing years caught in the grinding gears of Victor and his Mafia machine. The true heartbreak is not that she is weeping over a lost criminal husband. She is drowning in massive shame for convincing herself his toxic darkness was just a normal shadow. Adrian reaches across the table and totally shatters that illusion. He tells her she was never pathetic. She was literally emptying her veins to resurrect a dead vow while a monster threw her away. The simple life lesson is crystal clear. Do not ever mistake your endless capacity to endure absolute cruelty for a fatal flaw in your own soul. Watch the muscles in her face surrender in this frame. It is the visual equivalent of a massive steel vault cracking under pressure. The horror of her captivity is realizing she does not know how to breathe without the mob boss who held her chain. At 34, she sees an empty ghost in her reflection and feels utterly worthless. But Adrian refuses to let her sink. He looks at this ruined canvas of a woman and names it the most magnificent beginning she will ever have. Stitching a soul back together is pure agony, but it can be done. When he leaves, you can feel the warmth drain from the room. The simple life lesson is that the terrifying void of an unknown future is exactly the rich soil where we are finally allowed to be born again. Look at the insane irony unfolding as Elena watches Adrian walk away. This guy just handed her an ordinary moment of human warmth, and to her shattered nervous system, it feels absolutely terrifying. Victor, the architect of her nightmare, spent 7 years starving her of emotional oxygen. He isolated her so flawlessly that a quiet conversation feels like blinding sunlight to someone trapped in a dark cave. That is the true hallmark of a psychological prison. The simple life lesson here is that pure, undivided attention is the most vital currency of human dignity. Just as her lungs finally remember how to take a full breath, the sharp buzz of her phone completely shatters the peace. The screen glows in the dim light, and an unknown number starts pulsing like an air raid siren. The phantom strikes exactly when she lets her guard down. It is Victor. The mob boss drops a hard legal deadline for Monday, deploying a cheap trick of artificial panic to prove he still controls her life. She deletes the message, but the venom is already in her veins. The camera cuts to 3 in the morning. Elena stares at the dark ceiling, reliving thousands of invisible wounds. It was never the screaming that broke her. It was the sick way he used his empire as an excuse to lock her in a golden cage. Claiming his absolute control was just protection. He wrapped his fists in silk and demanded she call it romance. The simple life lesson here is clear. Genuine devotion will never require you to live in a cage, and it will never ask you to erase your own soul. We are about to uncover what happens when the toll of pure survival finally cracks. For years, Elena played the flawless mafia wife, blinding herself to the midnight departures and cheap perfume on his jackets. She knew pulling one loose arranged thread would bring the rotten fabric down. But tonight, the weeping stops. The tears evaporate, leaving a cold, magnificent fury. She stares into the mirror with lethal disgust for the woman who folded her existence to fit tears inside a killer's pocket. She snatches a notebook and a heavy pen. Honestly, this is where the truest beauty of the human spirit emerges. The simple life lesson here is profound. Real healing does not always begin with gentle forgiveness. It often begins with the heavy, unyielding power of righteous anger. Look at the frantic motion of her hand carving words into paper. She is acting as a forensic investigator at the scene of her own psychological murder. At 27, she was a vibrant storm of dreams. By 34, she became a polished ghost sitting beside a crime boss. She writes down every forgotten piece of herself that Victor burned to ash. She is not plotting his ruin, and she does not crave his return. She just wants her stolen soul back inside her bones. When the dawn breaks, her hand is trembling from bleeding her absolute truth onto the page. It is a grueling thing to witness, but it teaches us a vital law of nature. The simple life lesson is undeniable. You cannot reclaim your lost identity until you looked directly at the ugly truth of how you surrendered it. The camera cuts to the next morning. Elena pushes through the glass doors of the cafe, and boom, there is Adrian sitting exactly where he promised. To a woman whose reality was built on mafia manipulation, a kept promise feels like a massive earthquake. They sit close, sipping bitter coffee. For the first time in 10 years, her eyes darting around the room, searching for traps. Victor had weaponized every single word, turning communication into a brutal game she was meant to lose. But here, bathed in the soft morning light, there are no games, just the quiet rhythm of two breathing humans. Her exhausted mind is finally resetting. The simple life lesson is that sometimes the most powerful salvation is found in a cheap cup of coffee with someone who demands nothing in return. Stick with me here. If one weapon destroys a manipulator's power, it is a new routine. Elena begins to lay the bricks of her fortress. Dawn brings the warmth of Adrian, and midnight brings the painful exorcism of her memories. Then she unleashes Patricia. This ruthless attorney looks at Victor's pathetic divorce offer and smiles like a hungry wolf. She pushes Elena to dig up every buried piece of operational dirt on the syndicate to use as a sword. Elena frees, terrified of the beast she is provoking. But then she remembers the countless nights she played the desperate therapist, talking a violent kingpin down from the ledge. The simple life lesson is that your exhausting emotional labor holds massive power, even when the person consuming it refuses to see it. Guys, we have to break this down right now, because the plot twist here is absolutely insane. Victor thought he was the ultimate mafia boss, a total ghost who never left a single paper trail. He kept Elena away from all the dirty work, thinking he was making genius moves. But he completely underestimated a savage like Patricia. This lawyer is out for blood. She knows they do not need bank statements when they can just weaponize his own extreme paranoia against him. Patricia drops a massive tactical nuke, threatening to leak every single secret conversation Elena ever overheard in the dark. Victor is sweating bullets. His own secrecy is choking him out. And honestly, here is the life lesson. The very walls you build to lock other people in will eventually become the exact same walls that crush you. Elena is walking a razor-thin wire right now, and the tension is through the roof. Half of her wants to strike a match and burn Victor's entire underworld empire to the ground. But the exhausted survivor inside her just wants to hit the eject button.
Patricia smells the station. Demand for $5 million.
She's betting everything on this mobster's desperate obsession with staying in the shadows. The camera zooms in on Elena, shaking like crazy. But then she completely buries her fear, goes stone cold, and drops the hammer. Sometimes to escape a total monster, you have to play their dark and twisted game. Shaking with pure adrenaline, she bolts from the office and hides out in some random art gallery. So check this out. Elena is standing frozen in this gallery, completely zoned in on a photo of a blown-out apartment building. Concrete is spilling into the street like absolute wreckage. While everyone else just walks by, she is staring at it like it is a mirror reflecting her own shattered light. Then Adrian slides into the frame right next to her, totally silent. He instantly reads the heavy, toxic energy dragging her down. The fake Mafia wife illusion has been completely ripped to shreds, leaving nothing but the brutal truth exposed. It is a harsh reality check, but here is the raw truth. Sometimes you have to let the wrecking ball smash your old, toxic life into pure dust before you can finally build something that will actually survive. Adrian leans in close, and you can see the intense empathy in his dark eyes under those harsh gallery lights. He drops a truth bomb, whispering that endings are always a massive, bloody mess. But there is a totally savage beauty in that kind of honesty. That validation absolutely wrecks Elena's last emotional shield. Her jaw is shaking as she stares at the rubble, and she spits out that the divorce papers are signed. A normal dude might buy her a drink, but Adrian just locks eyes with her and asks how her actual soul is holding up after the explosion. They just stand there in the heavy silence, soaking in the absolute chaos of her 7-year mistake. Honestly, true healing usually starts when you are standing in the smoking ashes of your past and you refuse to blink. You and I have to pause the video right here because this exact second flips the entire script. Adrian casually invites her to this insanely loud, chaotic art party downtown. We can literally see the pure panic grabbing Elena by the throat. Her instinct is screaming at her to sprint home and lock doors. For years, Victor brainwashed her into fearing anything he did not control. But she looks back at that blown-up building and it clicks. Hiding in a safe, locked room is literally just a different flavor of prison. She takes a deep breath and drops hers and dives straight into the massive overload of the real world. Listen, you will never escape the darkness if you do not force yourself to step out into the blinding, unpredictable light. The absolute madness of this gallery is the ultimate middle finger to Victor and his creepy obsession with control. Adrian introduces her to Kay, an absolute savage of a woman who just roasts people for fun. In 2 seconds flat, Hede totally reads Elena, instantly calling out the massive baggage of her brutal divorce. Back in Victor's Mafia empire, slipping up like that would be an absolute death sentence. But Kay just laughs it off. She waves around a cup of cheap champagne and wears her own failed marriages like they are gold medals. Seeing someone act so normal completely strips the horror away from Elena's private nightmare. The lesson here is incredibly real. Finding just one person who survived the exact same fire is the absolute fastest way to remember how to live again. Stick with me here, because we are hitting the emotional peak of the whole night. Elena freezes in front of this massive, aggressive canvas. It is just this violent, chaotic explosion of red and black paint that looks like a bird ripping the sky apart. Adrian steps up and asks what she sees. Her voice is shaking, but she totally nails it. She says it is that exact crossover between screaming rage and sudden freedom. Adrian totally gets it. His eyes go dark, and he quietly drops some heavy lore about his own past trauma and grief. Look at these two broken characters, just vibing in a packed room, using a painting to process all their unspoken damage. The takeaway is profound. You cannot truly experience the absolute thrill of freedom until you survive the anger of the cage.
Elena is literally waking up from a 7-year mind control trip. Victor was the absolute architect of her suffering, methodically tearing her sanity apart while she played the obedient
wife just to stay alive. But tonight, that fake porcelain mask is completely shattered. Adrian is stepping up as the ultimate mirror, validating every single ounce of her rage. They dip out of the noisy gallery and just wander through the glowing neon streets. He takes her to this chill bookstore and an open rooftop where Victor's toxic shadow cannot reach them. The lesson is practically glowing in neon letters right here. The absolute first step to finding your own identity is having the pure guts to walk away from the exact places and people that destroyed your spirit. Did you catch that slight stutter? Elena almost drops Victor's name, but swallows it down, admitting she only moved to this massive city for someone else. This is exactly what happens when a toxic boss erases your identity. Survivors will literally burn their own dreams to feed their captor's massive ego. But up on that freezing rooftop, you can see a total shift in her eyes. Looking down at the endless sea of lights, she feels super tiny. But unlike Victor's twisted mind games, this kind of smallness does not crush her. The city does not care about her mafia drama at all, and there is a crazy amount of freedom in that cold, hard fact. The life lesson here is crucial. True healing kicks in the exact second you realize the entire universe does not revolve around your trauma. A siren wails in the background as Adrian notices her whole vibe change. He points out it does not sound sad about the divorce at all. She just sounds completely drained but relieved. Instead of playing the good wife, Elena goes totally rogue and spills the actual truth. She tells him how Victor coldly dumped her right on their anniversary, throwing cash at her to buy her silence like she was broken hardware. What an absolute monster. Admitting how good it feels to drop the fake loyalty is a massive win for her. When Adrian tries to apologize, she holds up a hand, completely owning her raw, unfiltered truth. The message here is incredibly powerful. The absolute second you stop protecting the reputation of the villain who broke you, their power over you completely dies. Watch the camera focus completely on Elena as her voice drops to a whisper and she finally calls out the monster by name. Ripping out a toxic trauma bond is absolute torture, but leaving it inside is basically game over. Adrian matches her energy right away. He spills his own tragic backstory about an ex who weaponized his lack of money, using pure toxicity to kill his passion for art. This ex literally viewed his independence as an insult, which is a terrifying parallel to Victor's controlling Mafia playbook. How did Adrian survive? He drops the ultimate blueprint right here. He completely rejected the fake guilt they treated to. Listen up. You simply cannot level up in life while carrying the heavy expectations of the person who tore you down. Drop the dead weight. Look at the incredible framing of this shot. Adrian just nods, standing like an absolute rock against the bright city skyline. Right beside him, we get to watch Elena's shattered mind finally start putting the puzzle pieces back together. This calm feeling is not the frantic, toxic panic she always confused with love. This is the ultimate flex of true, genuine empathy. She actually thanks him for treating her like a real human being instead of a broken side quest. After years of emotional starvation, basic decency hits her like a massive glass of water in the desert. They just hang out until the city lights go dark, finally speaking freely. Let this lesson sink deep. The biggest proof of your glow up is when you stop bracing for a punch and just let yourself truly connect again. Today, you and I are going straight into this massive drama. Elena is flexing her tiny studio apartment like it is an absolute kingdom, and honestly, good for her. Escaping that toxic mafia boss Victor was the ultimate plot twist. Adrian asks to see her again, but totally leaves the ball in her court. No pressure, just a guy respecting boundaries. When Elena locks that door, her heart is beating out of her chest, but not from fear. The dread of waiting for Victor to stomp down the hall is gone. She is glowing with main character energy. The ghost of the abused wife era is officially cancelled. Here is a solid life lesson for you. Real freedom is not just running away from the villain of your story. It is finally remembering who you were before they tried to delete your personality. Just when the vibes are immaculate, her phone buzzes and ruins everything. It is a text from her lawyer. Victor is casually tossing a $5 million settlement on the table. But bro, we all know how this boss operates. That cash is basically an iron chain wrapped in fancy paper. Elena is not falling for it. She looks at the screen and sees a ransom note for her soul, not a winning lottery ticket. She rapid fires a text back, telling the lawyer to take the deal instantly. The lawyer whines because he wants a fatter paycheck, but she shuts him down. Dragging this out in court is exactly how Victor feeds his twisted ego. By folding, she starves the beast. Listen to this life lesson. Peace of mind is the ultimate flex. Sometimes, walking away is the most brutal revenge you can get. Picture this icy boardroom scene. $5 million is literal pocket change compared to the massive empire Elena built from scratch.
But going to war for fairness against a guy like Victor is a total rookie mistake. It's a psychological trap meant to keep her chained up forever. And get this, Victor does not even show his face.
That empty chair is just his pathetic, cowardly way of trying to look dominant. His lawyer, a guy with zero personality, slides the divorce papers across the heavy mahogany table. 72 hours until the cash drops. No massive explosion, no dramatic tears, just a boring pen scratching on paper. Remember this life lesson. Stop holding your breath for the villain to apologize. Real closure does not come with a crying confession. It just looks like an unlocked door. The camera zooms in on Elena shaking as she reads the wildest plot twist ever. Total legal immunity for Victor. This absolute snake is not just swiping her cash. He is literally deleting her entire legacy. Every genius business move, every all-nighter she pulled, just scrubbed from existence. Toxic villains always try to completely erase your reality. But guess what?
She signs that garbage anyway. Zero hesitation. Stepping out into the freezing city air, her greedy lawyer begs her to fight back one last time. Elena just closes her eyes,
feels the breeze, and drops a single word, no. Fighting means drinking his poison again. Take this life lesson to the bank. Sometimes you just have to let a toxic psycho steal the past so you can totally own your future. Watch the lawyer totally ditch her, blending into the street like a background character. The camera locks onto Elena, staring into space. She is completely dissociating right now. The iron chain tying her to the mob boss is officially snapped, but without that weight, she is floating like a ghost. Movies always show the main character screaming in victory here, but no. Her brain finally turns off survival mode and everything goes terrifyingly quiet. It is just a massive blank void. But her being numb does not mean Victor broke her. It actually brings up a seriously deep life lesson. Real healing never kicks off with a massive parade and fireworks. It almost always starts in a super creepy, empty silence. That blank space is exactly where you finally start rebuilding yourself. That suffocating street silence gets shattered when her phone vibrates. It is our boy Adrian. The lighting totally flips here. He does not grill her about the payout or ask for the messy legal tea. He just asks how she is doing, sounding like a genuinely solid dude. For a girl who just escaped a literal dictator, a guy actually respecting her boundaries is a massive plot twist. She admits she just feels totally numb, her fried brain finally shutting down the alarm bells. Adrian casually offers to just hang out by the water, 0 strings attached. You and I are in this together, and this life lesson is gold. If you want to bounce back from insane trauma, you have to actively create chill, safe memories in normal places. That is how you finally overwrite the horror movie you just walked out of. We cut straight to the docks, the sky looking all bruised and cynic. Adrian is already chilling there with hot coffee and a pastry. He straight up tells her she looks dead on her feet. If Victor said that, it would be a toxic mind game to destroy her confidence. But coming from Adrian, it is just a normal guy worried about a friend. He pushes her to eat. The camera gets right up in her face for that first bite. That simple hit of sugar literally drags her soul back into her belly. Sitting by the dark water, the massive ice wall around her finally starts melting. She honestly thought the divorce papers would instantly fix her brain. Here is the life lesson. The signature might mop the lock on your cage, but only patience and truly safe people are going to actually set you free. Stick with me here, because you and I are about to watch the ultimate irony unfold. Elena thought a piece of paper would magically delete years of Mafia-level psychological warfare. Instead, she is just sitting there feeling completely hollowed out. But Adrian drops an absolute truth bomb. He tells her that cutting off a toxic boss does not spawn a fully leveled up character. It just gives you an empty room to go find who you were before the disaster. He casually mentions his own wrecked engagement. No crazy movie magic here, just brutal, slow progress in the dark. Right then, the whole vibe shifts. Elena turns her head and actually looks at this guy for the first time. The lesson is simple. Healing is not a magic trick. It is a messy, painful rebuilding process from the ground up. The camera zooms in tight on her face, and you can literally see her brain buffering. Adrian is the exact opposite of her mobster ex-husband. 0 manipulative charm, 0 insane mind games. He is just insanely, beautifully normal. Elena is totally tripping out, realizing this random photographer guy is the absolute safest person she has met in years. But Adrian hits her with a line that cuts deep. He tells her that when you survive an absolute psycho, a normal human being feels like a massive red flag. Grab this life lesson before we move on. The hardest pill to swallow when you are recovering is that real safety does not show up with a crazy soundtrack and fireworks. It just quietly sits down next to you on a random bench and demands absolutely 0 things in return. We are looking straight at the messy fallout of a survival run. This is the hangover from being trapped in a psychological hostage situation where the cage was made of pure gold. Adrian leans back, making it totally obvious he expects 0 things from her. Watch the exact second her battered nervous system finally taps out. Her shoulders drop, and that massive knot in her chest just dissolves. She whispers you to thank you just for letting her be a total mess. It is wild how a toxic boss has to destroy your soul so much. that basic human decency feels like magic. Here is a totally chilling life lesson. When your entire brain is wired to survive intense, constant attacks, finally getting room to breathe does not feel like winning. It literally feels like you are falling off a cliff. Adrian slices through that heavy tension like an absolute pro. He jokes that everyone is a complete train wreck, but she is the only one admitting it. You and I need to appreciate how smooth this is. The sun goes down in these crazy purple colors while it's the most boring, normal stories ever. He complains about a trash client, and she talks about wanting a bright apartment. They're totally rejecting the dark villain lair she used to live in, but her hands are still shaking, stirring coffee that is already mixed. Having zero rules tying her down is exactly what is freaking her out. The reality here is harsh. Here is the life lesson. If you lock a bird inside a cage for its entire life, suddenly throwing the door open to a massive sky is not a dream come true. It is a straight-up nightmare. Her instinct to run away at max volume. She talks about ghosting everyone and moving to a random city where the Shulus just escape her own trauma. But the brutal truth hits her hard. You cannot run away from your own brain. She decides to lock her feet onto this cracked sidewalk until she reveals her true self. Adrian just nods, telling her it is the most savage, brave move she could make. They start walking down the waterfront with literally nowhere to be. This is a massive plot pivot. She is not just surviving anymore, she is actually living, chilling with a guy who charges zero emotional rent. When he asks to show her a spot, she just says yes. Check out this final life lesson. Healing actually starts the very second your heart stops bracing for a toxic attack that is never coming again. Look at this move. Adrian takes Elena out of that fake city district and pulls her straight into a rusted textile factory. The heavy iron door screeches open to his studio, and boom, the smell of harsh chemicals and rough brick hits her. It is total whiplash. That absolute psycho Victor kept her trapped in a sterile penthouse, like a literal trophy. But Adrian? His spot is pure chaos. Wires everywhere, raw portraits hanging up. It is a disaster zone, but honestly, it feels safe. By flipping on the lights and letting her see this mess, he is basically handing her his soul. And here is the real-life lesson. You will never find actual trust in some flawless plastic setup. Real trust only happens when someone has the guts to let you see their absolute, unpolished disaster of a life. What really shatters her heart here is how chill Adrian is about his flaws. Back in the absolute war zone she just crawled out of, showing 1 ounce of weakness meant Victor would crush you. She walks around the studio, looking at gritty photos of rotting buildings, and it totally mirrors the wreckage inside her own head. Then she sees his portraits. Raw, zero makeup, completely unguarded, none of those fake plastic smiles Victor forced her to wear. She whispers that his shots are beautiful. Instead of flexing his ego, Adrian just shrugs, admitting he does not even know why he brought her here. It brings us to a simple life lesson. It is never some massive cinematic speech that heals a broken spirit. It is just pure, unfiltered honesty that finally cracks the heavy armor we drag around. Pay attention here, because Adrian is about to drop a masterclass on fixing a broken mind. Lena swears the escape did not fix her, totally convinced she is ruined forever. Adrian shakes his head, walks into the dark room, and pulls out a blurry photo. Then he drops a second one with better shadows and finally a perfectly clear shot. He looks her dead in the eyes and says human recovery works exactly the same way. Victor did not actually destroy her true identity. That monster just forced it to hide in the dark, waiting for the right time to step back into the light. The life lesson here is massive. You do not need to invent some flawless, brand new version of yourself. You just to be patient and reveal the real soul that survived the absolute worst. Let us hit pause. You and I really need to appreciate how heavy this moment is. Elena stares at the photos, asking if she is the one stuck in the darkroom now. Adrian locks eyes with her and says yes. Her spirit survived the inferno. It just needs a safe spot to grow. Her shoulders shake as she drops her ultimate fear. What if the real girl buried under the trauma is hideous? Adrian just flashes a calm smile. He tells her absolutely nobody is a finished masterpiece. We are all a work in progress. Caught in that intensely safe bubble, she looks at his lips, genuinely wanting to kiss him. This leaves us with a massive truth. The highest level of bravery is simply letting another person see you with all your ugly, jagged flaws out in the open. Watch her body language right here. This is proof that her mental scars are finally healing. Instead of grabbing him like a desperate hostage, she steps back. She knows her brain is way too scrambled for romance right now. Adrian reads the room perfectly. He kills the tension and announces they are getting food. Cut to a completely chaotic diner where they sit on cheap plastic chairs. He orders in hilariously broken Mandarin, making the kitchen staff lose their minds laughing. Elena starts roasting him over his terrible pronunciation, and for the first time, a real spark hits her eyes. The life lesson here is undeniable. True healing almost never starts with some epic romantic rescue mission. It usually kicks off with the simple, quiet ability to just laugh again. Look at how she crashes onto the mattress. No panic attacks, no waiting for the next insane demand, just the normal exhaustion of a regular day. She is trying to process spending time with a guy who does not exploit her, but reality always crashes the party. The sun comes up, her phone buzzes, and boom. $5.3 million drop into her pocket champagne, but trauma about my her face is totally dead. She just feels a suffocating weight on her chest. The brutal in the world, but it will never buy back the years a toxic psycho stole from you. And it definitely cannot glue a shattered heart back together. You and I have to look at the absolute audacity at this move. That pile of money is Victor flexing his control from afar. To a boss with zero empathy, human lives are just line items on a spreadsheet. This cash is his twisted severance package for keeping her locked up for 7 years. Elena's whole body locks up. She wants to wage war to make this monster feel the pain he caused. But then, watch her jaw relax. She finally realizes you cannot force a shark to apologize for biting you. It is just not in their DNA. Instead of fighting a ghost, she texts Adrian and walks into a normal coffee shop, soaking in the sunlight. The life lesson here hits hard. Real peace does not come from destroying your enemies. It comes from walking away and choosing to live your life out in the sun. Watch Adrian right here. He sees Elena drag herself into the cafe, looking like she is carrying a gravestone. He knows the massive transfer hit her account, but she looks destroyed. He slides a hot coffee into her shaking hands. The dialogue here is gut-wrenching. Elena admits she feels totally hollow, 7 years acting as his perfect wife. And Victor just pays her off like a broken piece of furniture. She is torn between burning the millions and knowing she needs it to survive. As she holds that mug, the darkest twist sets in. That massive payout is pure proof she never meant a thing to the man she worshipped. The life lesson is brutal. The truths we desperately need to hear are almost always the ones that leave us feeling entirely bankrupt inside. Freeze the video right here, because you and I know exactly how savage this moment is. Elena is choking on her words, as admitting the huge stack of cash means absolutely nothing. The real backstab is easily Victor grabbed her from his life. Adrian looks at her and asks what apology would actually fix this. She stares at the table. Nothing. No magical sentence can glue her brain back together. Then Adrian hits her with a heavy question. He asks if she is actually free of the boss. Trapped by the facts, her tough act finally shatters. She whispers that a huge chunk of her souls is still sitting right there in Victor's pocket. It brings us the harshest lesson about survival. You can physically escape the compound, but your mind can stay locked inside that cage for years. The camera zooms in on her trembling hands. Elena breaks down, confessing her mind is still trapped inside that luxury penthouse, chained to Victor's ghost. Adrian gives her zero fake pity. He validates her trauma and grabs her hand with a solid grip. He reminds her that rebooting a broken mind takes serious time. She starts crying, feeling unworthy of a guy this loyal. But Adrian just looks at her with total determination. He tells her straight up that his patience is his own choice. You instantly see the guilt melt off her shoulders. As they walk, the difference hits you. The mob boss controlled her with chaos, but a real ally fixes her with calm. The life lesson: true freedom never starts with an explosion. It starts when the quiet moments finally stop feeling like a loaded gun. Let us break down this scene by the water. The camera shows huge cargo ships, but Elena only stares at a tiny sailboat. It hits her like a punch to the gut. She used to be a huge sailor. But Victor manipulated her into selling her boat, faking concern about her getting seasick. The dark reality? A toxic boss hates the ocean because he cannot control the waves. He brainwashed her into torching her only escape route. Blinded by his fake affection, she handed over her sanctuary, thinking she was just making a compromise for love. The terrifying life lesson here is one we all need to remember. You almost never lose your freedom in a massive, violent shootout. Most of the time, you literally hand the keys to your cage straight to the villain, and you do it with a giant smile on your face. Adrian points out that with the casket Victor dumped on her, she could buy a new boat today. Elena lets out a bitter laugh. It is the exact reflex of someone's years in a, psychological basement. The idea of making her own choices feels like a sick prank. She claims she forgot how to sail, terrified the ocean would swallow her up. Adrian is not having it. He refuses to indulge this victim mindset, calmly telling her she can just relearn. Watch the insane shift in her eyes right at this second. For the first time in a decade, the shadow of the mob boss finally evaporates from her mind. Reclaiming a stolen passion is completely terrifying. The life lesson here is that recovery is never some massive superhero jump. It is always just one tiny, terrifying step toward taking your power back. Let's kick this off, guys, because the universe has a sick sense of humor. Stick with me, because you and I are about to watch a mental collapse in real time. Elena is grabbing coffee when she spots him. Victor, the monster who wrecked her life, is strolling through the sun like a saint. She freezes so violently that Adrian nearly bumps into her. And get this, Victor has his hand resting on a new girl's back. To anyone else, it looks like romance, but we know the truth. That is the exact choreography of a predator marking his fresh. The life lesson here is brutally simple. Surviving a monster doesn't make them disappear. Sometimes the real horror is just standing perfectly still, forced to watch them build that exact same beautiful, inescapable cage for somebody else. Look at the psychological torture happening here. The guy across the street isn't the tyrant Elena barely survived Victor has hit the reset button, stepping back into his flawless, charming disguise. Adrian's voice fades to static as she watches Victor open a taxi door with the exact venomous charm he used to dismantle her existence. When Adrian snaps her out of it, a large truth bomb. Seeing him still hurts her to the bone. She hates his guts, but the pure injustice is ripping her apart. How does the villain get to smile in the daylight while she sweeps up her shattered mind? Here is the bitter life lesson. We just have to accept that sometimes the absolute worst monsters in this world are the ones who get to walk away completely unscathed and perfectly happy. Most people soothe trauma with fake promises of karma. Adrian refuses to play that game. He never insults her intelligence by pretending Victor is secretly miserable, staying grounded. He is the exact opposite of the chaotic minefield she used to survive. He steers her into the dead silence of an art museum. Elena collapses onto a bench in front of a violently abstract painting. The messy brushstrokes perfectly mirror her broken brain. She is choking on unvoiced rage. When Adrian asks her to name the feeling, she nails it. She is furious the parasite found a fresh host. The life lesson here hits hard. Our deepest anger rarely comes from the pain itself. It comes from watching the universe reward the wicked, while surviving victims are left begging for just one single drop of peace. The camera zooms in as Elena presses, making shaking hands against her eyes, dropping a devastating confession. She wants Victor to drown in the exact same psychological hell he dragged her through. Her voice actually breaks as she calls herself pathetic for craving revenge. Adrian leans in, totally. Let's unpack this together, guys. He completely validates her rage, explaining that wishing absolute ruin on the guys who shredded your soul just drove to us Bill's crew, but to know you drastically begs to when this awful withdrawal will finally stop. Adrian gives it to her straight. The life lesson here is incredibly profound. One day, the paralyzing terror will simply burn itself out. Our deepest wounds do not heal with fake apologies from toxic people, but with the slow, steady return of our own ice-cold indifference. Adrian's voice is the only anchor in the room. There's no magic switch to turn off this grief. Elena's eyes dart wildly as panic bubbles up. She has a frantic urge to warn Victor's fresh victim before the trap snaps shut, picturing the girl walking blind into a slaughterhouse. Adrian through the hysteria with one brutal question. If somebody had warned Elena 7 years ago, would she have listened? The realization hits her like a freight train. Blinded by Victor's golden boy routine, she would have ignored every red flag. The bitter life lesson is undeniable here. We simply cannot rescue other people from the blazing fires we barely survived ourselves. The devastating truth is that some beautiful, toxic cages must be painfully felt before they are ever truly seen. The worst tragedy of toxic abuse is how it totally erases who you are. Elena sits hollowed out, basically a ghost in this dim gallery. She's mad her legal settlement didn't instantly delete the nightmares. Adrian watches her shake, dropping a heavy truth. Healing is never a straight line. Your brain will plunge from total calm to panic with zero. Warning, seeing her drown in dark thoughts, Adrian abruptly pulls her off the bench. He marches her away from the paintings to a violently twisted bronze sculpture. He forces a sudden shift in her physical space just to snap that toxic mental loop. The life lesson is incredibly visceral here. If you ever want to break free from a spiraling, dark mental prison, you absolutely have to force your physical body into forward motion first. Stick with me here, because the brilliance of this scene is amazing. Adrian points at the jagged metal under the spotlight and asks what she sees. Elena brushes it off as a chaotic mess. Adrian simply tells her to walk around the sculpture. As she moves, that chaotic still suddenly lines up into a breathtaking pattern. Adrian uses this iron to drop a massive truth bomb. She is looking at Victor from the worst possible angle. She is staring at his fake shiny life, while Spiao is standing dead center in the crater of her own trauma. Seeing Victor as an untouchable god is just a mirage fueled by her leftover grief. The life lesson is undeniable when you finally force yourself to shift your perspective. That towering, terrifying monster instantly loses every single ounce of his dark power. Let's pause the frame, because you and I both know exactly what this agonizing space feels like. Elena is pacing like a trapped animal, begging Adrian for a magic cheat code to fix her brain. Adrian delivers a massive reality check. You cannot stand still in the cold ashes of your ruined life. You have to keep moving, circling the wreckage until you realize the terrifying monster who broke you was actually just a fragile, pathetic little man. Elena stops dead, looking past his casual vibe to realize Adrian is quietly saving her soul. The life lesson here is incredibly beautiful. Sometimes the only way to conquer the suffocating shadow of a tragic past is to turn your back on the ruins completely and force yourself to build something entirely new. Adrian asks when she last did something purely for fun. The emptiness in her eyes is heartbreaking. She cannot remember. He brings her to a gritty batting cage under buzzing lights. It is painful to her to watch at first. Her body is rigid, locked in pure survival mode. Adrian gently adjusts her shaking shoulders with total patience. Then she swings. The crack of the bat echoes like a gunshot. In one violent motion, years of suffocating rage explode out of her system. She swings like a maniac until her muscles burn, trading paralyzed fear for genuine, breathless laughter. The life lesson is intensely physical. You simply cannot think your way out of a frozen heart. You have to violently sweat out that dark poison until your body finally remembers how to smile again. Walking through the night air, Elena's posture visibly softens. A batting cage won't cure a shattered soul, but the crushing weight on her chest has cracked. Under the streetlights, she thanks Adrian for pulling her from the abyss. Instead of eating up the BAs like Victor did, Adrian shrugs it off, reminding her she swung the bat herself. This humble reaction totally short-circuits her traumatized brain. But at her apartment door, paranoia infects her again. After years of sick manipulation, basic kindness looks like a loaded weapon. She demands to know his real angle. The life lesson here is deeply tragic. Prolonged toxic exposure trains your brain to be utterly terrified of the exact same hands that are reaching into the dark to save your life. Adrian answers with a grounding honesty that would have shattered a tyrant like Victor. He confesses he prefers her chaotic ruin over the lifeless doll she was forced to play. He sees a brilliant fire buried beneath her trauma and just wants a front row seat when she lets it burn. To a woman, restore fake affairs. This unconditional support is terrifying. Sensing her panic, Adrian deflects with a self-deprecating joke about an ex who mocked his ambitions. Instantly, Elena's walls drop, and she steps up to defend him. The dark fog of her past lifts just enough to see his untainted heart. The life lesson is beautiful here. True power is never found in breaking the people you claim to love, but in quietly helping them build something profoundly genuine. Stick with me, because you and I need to watch this shift. Elena walks into her apartment feeling genuine peace for the first time in years. Then her phone lights up. A text reveals Victor is parading his new victim around, asking if Elena is falling apart. He feels his leash slipping, tapping the glass to see if his broken bird still flinches. The camera holds on her face. There is zero panic. She recognizes his pathetic manipulation instantly. The mutual friend told Victor she was thriving, dealing a fatal stab to his fragile ego. A bold, defiant smile touches her lips. The life lesson hits with pure cinematic force. The absolute most devastating revenge you can inflict on an abuser is simply forgetting they even exist and daring to be completely happy. Guys, we are starting off with an absolute cinematic masterpiece. Picture Elena, bathed in that gritty neon light, texting Adrian that she is doing okay. For someone who just escaped a massive walking red flag like this is a colossal win. Restores she is leaning against the glass, finally seeing the world without her toxic ex's suffocating filter. Sure, she has a huge mountain of trauma to climb, and the fear of sliding backward hovers in the shadows. But right now, she owns her own existence, totally rent-free. And here is a simple life lesson for you. True freedom is rarely some explosive action scene. Most of the time, freedom is just standing in a quiet room, completely alone, and finally being able to take one deep, uninterrupted breath. We get this clean montage of Elena rebuilding her vibe over 3 weeks. She's anchoring herself to chill moments with Adrian, rebooting her nervous system to accept absolute peace. She is reviving passions Victor ruthlessly crushed. But obviously, the villain never just drops off the map. The collision happens in the most basic fluorescent lit grocery store ever. Suddenly, Victor's voice hits her spine like ice. Bro is standing right there. The scary power suit is gone, replaced by a sad, faded sweater. He looks totally exhausted, like a wounded predator scanning her defenses for a weak spot. It brings us to a harsh but meaningful life lesson. The darkest ghosts of your past will always wait for your most quiet, unguarded moment to tap you on the shoulder. The camera totally locks onto Elena here, and the sheer effort it takes for her not to shatter is insane. Anyone else would shake, but she slaps on a rigid mask of pure apathy. She tosses out a boring excuse about living nearby, starving his massive ego of the reaction he is begging for. The tension in that aisle is absolutely toxic. When Vic softly drops that she looks lighter, the irony is sickening. She is lighter because she dumped his heavy psychological baggage. He casually asks for coffee. Behind her deadpan stare, her internal alarms are screaming at her to drop everything and bolt. The lesson here is brutal but necessary. Your deepest survival instincts never lie to you. Your body will always recognize the ravenous wolf, even when he acts gentle. The absolute scariest weapon a toxic predator has is the fake illusion of their own brokenness. It slips right past your defenses and hacks your empathy. The camera finds Elena in a crowded youth coffee shop, against every instinct screaming in her chest. She gives Victor exactly 10 minutes. They sit with a massive chasm of dead history between them. Victor leans in, instantly rewriting their past. He paints himself as a selfless hero, flexing about the money he spent to protect her. It is a beautiful, venomous lie, but her hands have finally stopped shaking. She just glares at him with glacial coldness, demanding the real reason he showed up. The life lesson is absolute. To heal from a master manipulator, you must stop bleeding for their fake wounds and demand the truth. You and I have watched this tragedy before, and the audacity is just maddening. Victor hunches over his coffee, crying about the agonizing pain of their breakup. He shattered her universe, yet expects her to play nurse for his bruised ego. Then a massive shift happens if it's in her eyes. Elena taps into the only emotion sharp enough to save her pure, righteous fury. She slices right through his pathetic performance, dropping cold facts. He found a younger, fragile girl to control and tossed Elena aside. Devastatingly simple, Victor scrambles, dropping desperate excuses to blur the truth, but she does not blink. The life lesson here is your permanent shield. Toxic people thrive in confusion. You destroy their power by forcing them into the bright sun of absolute truth. The camera zooms in super tight on his face here. When a tyrant loses their grip, their physical body literally starts to short-circuit. Victor's jaw turns to solid granite. He stammers out empty lines about wanting to do the right thing, which is an absolute mockery of the trauma he caused. Elena just looks at him, seeing the terrifying void beneath his skin. Bro never came for an apology. He came to harvest her empathy to stitch up his bleeding pride. A heavy silence drops as Elena pushes her chair back, totally ready to leave. That is the exact second the monster totally breaks. Victor lunges across the table, his voice cracking as he begs for 5 more minutes. The lesson is undeniable. Enforce an iron boundary, and fake sorrow will shatter into desperate, ugly panic. Elena slowly sits back down, letting the silence literally drag the confession out of his throat. The cinematic power shift here is breathtaking to witness. For the first time ever, Victor is sweating under the hot lights of consequences. He finally spills the absolute rot inside his chest. Arena, his shiny new replacement, is already failing him. Barely 3 months in, and the illusion is completely cooked. He whines that she drains his wallet and refuses to bow down. Then comes the poisoned bait. He locks onto Elena's eyes, whispering that leaving her was his biggest mistake. He expects her to crumble. But here is a life lesson to carve into your soul. When the person who discarded you crawls back, it is never love. They only return because the shiny new toy is broken. In a basic movie, this is the sweeping climax, where the heroine gets her sweet revenge. But instead of a triumphant rush, Elena just feels the Tusaman's massive, heavy exhaustion. The camera lingers on her relaxed shoulders. The spell is completely dead. She studies him with the detached pity of a surgeon looking at a disease. Her voice is just a whisper when she tells him that leaving her was never his mistake. His true failure was thinking a new woman could magically pave over the bit inside his soul. He chased a hollow distraction to avoid doing the actual work. She outlines his tragic future, just an endless loop of broken relationships. The lesson here is carved in stone. You can switch your partner all you want, but you will never outrun your shadow until you fix yourself. Let us freeze the frame right here and unpack this brilliant shift together. Victor scrambles to mount a pathetic denial, but the guilt is totally etched into his face. Elena watches him, her voice dropping to an IE tone that strips his armor away. Desperate, he plays his final card, swearing she is his only desire. 6 weeks ago, those words would have dragged her back into his trap. Tonight, they bounce off her like rain on steel. She offers him nothing but clinical pity. The syntactic irony is devastating. He does not actually want Elena. He is craving the shattered pet he spent years programming. But that version of her is gone. The life lesson is haunting. A manipulator never misses you. They only miss the gust of showing the control they used to have over you. Look closely at this moment. She slides his invisible script back across the table, finally locking in her freedom. Victor spirals into messy desperation, swearing that people can change. Elena leans in, delivering a fatal blow to his massive pride. She asks for one single piece of proof that he has grown in the last 90 days. The heavy silence filling the room is his loudest confession. Bro literally just swapped his target for a younger one. She cuts the cord right there. As the camera follows her out, her hands are shaking violently. and her chest heaves with every frantic heartbeat. Yet her mind is completely still. The lesson here is something we all need to remember. Waiting for closure is an absolute trap. Real closure is finding the raw courage to just walk away. The visual poetry of this shift is striking. Elena steps into the sunlight, leaving Victor to rot in his memories. Her phone lights up with a chill dinner invite from Adrienne, and she says yes. What happens next is a wonderfully clumsy dance between two hesitant people stumbling through real connection. She is totally falling for him, thinking he is just a normal, safe guy. But look at this, guys. The massive plot twist is coming. Victor is actually the don of a huge syndicate, and Adrian, he is literally Victor's top enforcer. A 20-year ticking time bomb, waiting to destroy the boss from the inside. The life lesson here is absolutely wild. The quiet person you think is your safe haven is actually the ruthless architect of your enemy's complete destruction.
Look at Elena here. Guys, she is out of the war zone, stepping into a fresh romance, but her mental shields are still at absolute maximum capacity. Healing is not some quick overnight patch.
The second she locks her apartment door, she is on the phone with Marcus, breaking down the whole encounter. She knows the ugly truth. Victor, her toxic ex, is already losing his mind without her control. Marcus grills her, checking for any cracks in her armor, but she swears she did not give an inch.
They realize Victor's shiny new life is imploding, cause his new girl just does not have brutal conditioning to handle his crazy. The big takeaway today, you can build the most insane,
controlling fake reality possible, but it will always crumble. Fake empires just cannot hold up against the crushing weight of the real world. Marcus crunches the numbers and drops a massive reality bomb on her. He bets Victor's hollow operation will collapse in under a month, meaning that Wolf is heading straight back to her doorstep. Elena is white-knuckling her phone, swearing her defenses are locked for good, but Marcus knows exactly how a disgraced boss operates. When a control freak loses his grip, his brain totally short-circuits. He is going to use every completely trick to steal back his favorite asset. He warns her to brace for her hurricane of toxic mind games. Watch the camera push in on her right. Here she is picturing Victor drowning in his own toxic entitlement, but there is literally zero fear left in her eyes. Here is a totally grounded life lesson for you. Let the villains scream into the void all they want. When you build your walls out of pure truth, they never fall. Stick with me on this next shot, because we are watching the exact second this entire plot flips upside down. Marcus promises to align against the chaos, and they hang up. The camera pans across her tiny apartment. And sure, the furniture is beat up and there is clutter everywhere, but the vibe in this room is finally clean. For 7 brutal years, every single move she made was dictated by a control freak. Now, and she is chilling in a zone totally free of his toxic garbage. Cut to later that night at a chaotic pizza joint. Adrian is across the table, laughing his head off and arguing over basic pizza toppings. It is so ridiculously normal and wonderfully boring. The takeaway here is actually massive. When you have your life surviving straight up psychological warfare, scoring a boring, completely normal evening, the absolute lottery, you can literally see the invisible chains shattering right on the screen, debating something as totally pointless as toppings with Adrian hits her brain with the ultimate factory reset. Escaping a toxic nightmare does not always look like some movie scene with huge speeches in the pouring rain. Real healing is sneaky. It happens while you are just laughing at a regular dinner table, finally scrubbing away the grime of being locked down. The heavy fog just evaporates. Check out her body language the exact second Victor's name drops. The dude who literally engineered her worst nightmares gets swatted away with a completely blank stare. We are done. She casually drops, sipping her wine like she is checking the weather app. The life lesson here is an absolute knockout. The ultimate revenge against somebody who tried to destroy you is never anger. It is pure, ice-cold indifference. Let us take a close look at her face in this frame. You can see her shoulders finally drop, and that harsh lighting actually looks soft on her. She is officially logging out of that exhausting, hyper-paranoid survival mode. It would be super easy to give Adrian all the credit here. Her ex spent years brainwashing her into thinking she was totally damaged goods. But Adrian brings zero toxic energy to the table. There are no 3 a.m. screaming matches. He is just solid and totally relaxed. The genius of Adrian is that he never tries to act like some macho savior. He is not trying to fix her at all. This brings us to a massively important truth about surviving the dark times. You do not need some shiny knight riding in to rescue. You really just need a zock-solid environment where you can slowly rebuild your own life. The camera zooms out to show us this totally incredible contrast. That razor-sharp anxiety that used to dictate her entire existence is melting into a genuinely honest vibe. She's finally swapping out those toxic adrenaline spikes she confuse youth with real love. But then a loud phone ring shatters the chill mood. Adrian gets hit with a family emergency and has to bolt, leaving her solo at the table. She just looks around the room, soaking in the background noise of couples drinking on a random Tuesday night. She genuinely craves that totally basic, unbothered lifestyle. When your brain has been hijacked by Spike's top manipulator, a boring night out is never a punishment. It is straight up luxury. Honestly, sometimes absolute peace and quiet is the only way a battered soul Fatu learns how to breathe without constantly waiting for the next attack. You and I can literally see the light bulb go off in her head during this super quiet close-up. It does not have any of that chaotic, desperate energy from her old toxic flings. Instead, it hits her with absolute, crystal clear logic. She just wants Adrian, plain and simple. She wants an existence totally scrubbed of all that heavy bow drama. No more hidden booby traps. No more walking on eggshells just to keep a raging narcissist pacified. And Adrian steps back into the frame looking absolutely gutted. His dad just got rushed to the hospital. Watch her reaction right here. With Victor, every single crisis was a calculated stunt to keep her isolated. But this is the real world. She does not panic. Her hands are steady. She just looks at him and tells him to go handle his family. True strength is staying perfectly grounded when your old trauma is screaming at you to run away. He drops a quick kiss on her cheek before leaving, and it honestly feels like the start of a whole new era. She walks back to her apartment through the dead of night, but those dark streets do not feel like a horror movie anymore. They just feel peaceful. She actually wants to be there for Adrian, which is a wild upgrade from the weaponized loyalty her ex used to demand. She tries to play it cool and pretend that they are just buddies, but that massive grin on her face completely exposes her. She is officially ready to strike a match and burn her toxic timeline to ash. But come on, life loves a nasty plot twist. Right when you think she is, phone screen lights up and ruins the vibe. The monster who broke her is banging on the door, again, desperate for his power trip. The lesson here is brutal. Your past almost never taps out without throwing one last punch.
We are witnessing the total meltdown of a villain who just realized his favorite asset went rogue. The camera locks onto that glowing phone screen. One's missed call, then two, then three.
This is a calculated psychological attack designed to annoy her into submission. When she finally breaks and answers, that arrogant voice slices right through the calm of her apartment. He starts barking demands, threatening to crash her safe zone. Feeling suffocated by his massive ego, she makes a fatal error and agrees to meet him in public for exactly 1 hour. This is a colossal mistake. It is the loaf left over from Toysner Flerfigen. It is that tragic, foolish lie we all tell ourselves when backed into a corner. We actually think we can calm a starving wolf by throwing it one last scrap of our sanity. Whatever you do, never feed the wolves. Stick with me here because the tension in this next scene is literally thick enough to shatter bulletproof glass. Elena is waiting in this super shady, dimly lit bar where all the worst secrets get buried. She is sweating bullets, but there is this wild, morbid curiosity gluing her to the booth. She desperately needs to see the boss who ruined her life and completely stripped of all his untouchable swagger. The heavy door bashes open and Victor strolls in like he owns the city. He slides into the leather booth opposite her, swirling a glass of scotch. But zoom in on his eyes for a second. There is zero heartbreak happening there. He is glaring at her with the deeply unhinged anger of a predator staring at a bunt-spud trap. It is an incredibly brutal truth to swallow. But sometimes the people crying about how much they love you are actually just furious that you finally cut their puppet strings. You seem stronger, Victor whispers, his tone saturated with that classic toxic manipulation he loves to use. But get this, Elena does not flinch. She squares her shoulders, staring him down without a single drop of the pure panic he here to feast on. When he realizes his alpha dog routine is a complete bust, he instantly switches to weaponized pity. He leans in close, doing this fake sigh, and totally trashes his new girlfriend by calling her nice. In his twisted sociopath dictionary, nice just translates to completely useless to his massive ego. He looks Elena dead in the eye and claims he misses her fire. But let us be real, he does not miss her at all. He just misses the energy he used to siphon out of her. The ultimate lesson learned here is harsh but critical. Never confuse a toxic person missing what you did for them with them actually missing this human being you are. Look at this absolute masterclass in toxic manipulation, guys. Victor is sitting there trying to pull his classic mob boss mind games, but Elena, she looks him dead in the eye, ice cold, and drops absolute truth bomb. He never wanted a real partner in crime. He just wanted a convenient Cheeto. Then what does this guy do? He flashes this pathetic, wounded smile, acting like he just spilled a cup of coffee instead of literally burning her entire life to the ground. He is out here desperately trying to rewrite their brutal history and flip his garbage behavior into some hero's redemption arc. But listen up, because here is the real takeaway. Never let someone rebrand their calculated, cold-blooded cruelty as a simple little mistake just so they can sleep peacefully at night. Watch this snake slowly slide his fingers over hers. This is not some sweet romantic movie moment. This is a calculated attack on her trauma bond, tossing out crumbs of the exact warmth he starved her of for years. But the camera zooms in on Elena, and she is giving pure main character energy. She does not flinch, and she definitely does not melt. She just stares at him, realizing that top-tier villains do not magically wake up cured. They just learn how to wear shinier masks. She snatches her hand back, and boom, those heavy chains dragging her to the past finally shatter into pieces. This is a massive wake-up call for everyone. The most beautiful promises are straight-up garbage. when they come from someone who already proved they would destroy you to save their own skin. The way this entire showdown unfolds is pure genius. Elena goes full tactical mode, completely breaking down his pathetic little psychological games. She lists every single stage of his toxic cycle, right to his face: the crazy addictive start, the inevitable boredom, and the brutal, cold-blooded discard. She reads this man's twisted mind better than he does. When he tries to play the poor little victim, she literally weaponizes his own cynical words and fires them right back. And then she pulls the ultimate boss move. She just stands up. That one simple movement completely wrecks the power dynamic forever. The emotional vault shuts in his face. It is a legendary lesson in taking your power back. Sometimes the biggest flex is not screaming at the villain. It is just walking away and refusing to play their rigged game ever again. Desperate to get his grip back, Victor drops his final wild card, whispering that he actually loves her. The irony is insane. This supposed kingpin looks totally wrecked, staring up like a broken man who does not recognize his own reflection. But Elena has zero pity. She knows he is not begging the real her to stay. He is begging for that terrified, fragile girl from 7 years ago to come back. But guess what? That girl is dead. He is staring at a fierce survivor who completely owns her timeline now. As she struts out of the bar, her heavy footsteps sound like a lock turning on the cage she just escaped. It shows us the brutal cost of leveling up. True freedom means permanently leaving behind the weak of yourself that your enemies loved to exploit. His voice echoes down the street in a pathetic, desperate attempt to hook her back, but she does not pause until she is safely locked inside her car. She slams the heavy door, sealing herself in total silence, and then the adrenaline crash hits. She completely breaks down. But catch this detail. She is not crying over losing Victor. She is mourning the innocent, trusting girl she had to destroy to survive his toxic mind games. Right in the middle of this raw grief, her phone buzzes. A text from Adrian. No sick games, no hidden tricks, just pure, steady loyalty. It is the exact lifeline she needs. We all learned this the hard way eventually. Massive personal leveling up often feels exactly like brutal grief. And you just have to let it break you wide open so you can finally heal. Let us look closely at this moment, you and I, because this is where her old victim mentality gets permanently deleted. The camera locks onto her fingers, typing back to Adrian, agreeing to grab coffee in the bright daylight. As she speeds through those slick, rain-soaked city streets, Victor's pathetic little performance echoes in her head. A few months ago, those toxic words would have dragged her right back into the underworld. But look at her eyes in the rearview mirror now. Pure ice. She finally gets that love. Without had to be respect is just a fancy prison cell been painted gold. It hits us with a harsh but incredibly necessary truth about life. A hunter only cries for the deer when he realizes his trap is completely empty. Victor can scream into the void all he wants, but she is never stepping foot in that dark forest again. The lighting shifts into a gritty vibe, throwing jagged shadows across her apartment walls. The mind of a survivor is an insanely complicated battlefield. Elena desperately craves the rock-solid loyalty brings to the table. But the thought of dropping her defenses makes her heart hammer with panic. When you spend years dodging bullets in a toxic war zone, genuine kindness can actually feel like a trap. But watch her boss up. She pours steam smoothie and watches the rain batter the window. Staring out at the skyline, she holds a silent funeral for the terrified hostage she used to be. It is a brutal lesson, but so crucial to survive the worst winters of your life. You have to ruthlessly strip away the old versions of yourself that no longer protect you from the cold.
Pay attention to the crazy shift when
The camera pulls back.
we are witnessing a straight-up, violent rebirth. We kicked off the saga watching a naive kid walk into Victor's manipulative trap.
Slicing pieces of her soul just to keep the boss happy. Now, look at the queen standing in that kitchen. She is shaken up, breathing hard but finally free. Suddenly, her phone vibrates on the counter, shattering the silence. It is Victor lurking around her life like a ghost, checking for unlocked doors. The screen flashes in the dark over and over. Without even blinking, she grabs it, smashes the block button, and throws him into the void. This sequence drops a heavy truth bomb. A boundary is just a meaningless little line drawn in the dirt until you build the backbone to actually defend it. The camera stays locked on her pale reflection in the freezing glass. Her heart is pounding out of her chest, caught right between straight-up panic and a terrifying spark of hope about seeing Adrian tomorrow. She forces her brain to stay in the moment. Gripping that burning hot mug of tea, she uses the physical heat to ground her shaking hands. It is like watching a warrior learn to walk again after a critical hit. The reality about escaping a toxic underworld is that it is never pretty. Healing is not some chill montage of deep breathing. It is a brutal, exhausting war to take back your own mind. As thunder shakes the building and rain hammers the glass, we get the ultimate reality check. Leveling up hurts, but the pain of healing is infinitely better than the agony of staying broken. The scene cuts to the harsh gray reality of the next morning. She is running on zero sleep, her brain doing laps around everything she needs to confess. The coffee shop feels like the ultimate safe zone, glowing with warm amber light while the storm reaches outside. Adrian is already holding down a corner booth, 2 steaming cups on the table like a peace treaty. They do not even need to say. The heavy slump of her shoulders and the dark circles under her eyes scream louder than any dialogue. She crashes into the seat and wraps her freezing hands around the hot cup, letting the heat pull her shattered nervous system back down to reality. It leaves us with a beautifully simple truth. When the toxic world totally wrecked your mind, sometimes a quiet moment of absolucy is the exact thing that holds you together. Let us break down the insane micro-expressions carrying this scene. She shatters the silence, confessing that the second Victor left slithered out of the shadows. Adrian does not flinch. His jaw locks, but a violent spark of protective adrenaline flashes in his eyes. Her voice trembles as she recounts sitting across from the man who broke her, enduring his pathetic attempts to reclaim his favorite toy. But here is where we see her absolute titanium spine. She details exactly how she sliced the cord, tanked the fallout, and completely erased Victor from her map. She stares Adrian down, demanding he witness the survivor she has become. It is a brutal truth we all have to swallow. Ripping out a poisoned root is never a quiet process, and you have to survive the blast wave before you can ever claim your peace. Notice the body language in this frame, guys. She officially declares the bloody chapter of her past completely dead. Adrian gives a stoic nod, leaning back and showing open hands to prove he is zero threat. His voice now drops to a serious rumble, admitting his terror, but totally respecting her boss moves. He gets that raw free will is the only cure for a tyrant's poison. But she leans across that table, needing him to understand she did not run from the dot. She took the wheel, steered toward the light, and specifically chose him. Adrian freezes, the breath knocked out of him as she lifts a shaking hand to silence his doubts. The reality of surviving trauma is brutally clear here. True freedom is never just outrunning the villain. It is planting your feet and actively deciding who is worthy of holding your heart. Listen up, because the irony in the gas cafe scene is absolutely insane. We have Adrian casually handing over the exact same thing Victor used as a literal weapon against her zero-strings-attached sanctuary. He just sits there like an absolute boss, letting her cry it out and remember how to be human. But hold up, the second he hints she might just be confusing gratitude with real love, bam, the temperature drops to absolute zero. She snaps straight up, eyes literally blazing with pure defensive fire. There is no way she is letting another dude pull her strings. She knows the difference between a life raft and a real partner. It just goes to show you, guys, the biggest power move in life, in Liz's eye, isn't keeping your armor on. It's having the absolute guts to drop your guard and trust again. Look closely at this frame with me, because this is where the entire plot flips on its head. She completely goes for it, sliding her hand right across the table and locking onto his. Adrian is sitting there sweating bullets, terrified that crossing this line is going to nuke the only safe spot she has left. But underneath that calm face, her pulse is going absolutely crazy. She tells him so straight up that this wild, reckless jump is exactly what they need right now. Adrian is drowning in the suspense, teetering right on the edge of the cliff. Then, boom, he grips her hand back so hard and drops the ultimate confession. He has been waiting for this since day one. Here is the ultimate life lesson, bro. You can't start your epic comeback arc until you literally burn your old chapters to ash. This shot right here is a total masterpiece of pure tension. The absolute second she breaks down his walls, you can literally see the stress melt right off Adrian's jaw. They both know they are playing with pure fire here, so they slow the whole game down. No massive cheesy speeches, just two total survivors catching their breath while the rain hammers the glass. For the first time ever, the absolute chaos in her head just shuts down. Her ex tried to ruin her, but now she is the one holding the controller. Then, ring. His phone buzzes and absolutely wrecks the vibe. He has to bail, but they lock in a secret midnight meetup. Always remember this truth, guys. Having a safe spot doesn't guarantee you a perfect tomorrow. But having the pure freedom to call your own shots today is everything. Picture this angle, and he stops right at the door, locks onto her tired eyes, and calls her totally fearless. That she just laughs it off, saying she is basically just a drowning woman fighting to stay afloat. But Adrian drops an absolute truth bomb on her real courage. Never feels like winning. It just feels like straight up panic. He leaves a quick kiss on her head and vanishes into the rain. The second that door shuts, she can finally breathe again. Then, out of nowhere, the brutal glare of her burner phone lights up the room. Boom, a text from Marcus. The Mafia tyrant is back on the hunt. Without even blinking, she starts typing, setting up crazy digital traps. The lesson here is brutal but necessary. The demons from your past are always going to circle back to test how strong your new armor is. The screen lights up with Marcus asking if she is still surviving. And guys, this is the ultimate plot twist of the century. When she types back yes, it isn't some weak lie to keep her old boss happy. It is the absolute hardcore truth. She pushes open those doors and steps right into the freezing, pouring rain. The freezing water is absolutely drenching her, but it acts like a literal reset button, waking up the absolute savage survivor her ex tried to destroy. The camera goes into this insane montage of her completely draining the shadow bank accounts, moving all that dirty money into total ghost wallets. It leaves us with one absolute, non-negotiable truth in this world. When you are dealing with literal sharks, Having your own money is the only real way to buy your permanent freedom. You and I have got to talk about the absolute irony of this next move. We watch Elena ditching anything that looks like the cold, rich marble her old Mafia boss used to lock her up in. She sneaks up these busted stairs to Adrian's place, and the walls inside are just covered in his raw, chaotic photography. It is literally bleeding with real life. Adrian starts awkwardly apologizing for the messes, completely missing the point. For a girl who just escaped a sterile penthouse prison, this absolute disaster of a room is exactly what she needs. They just chill out and start cooking dinner together like nothing outside matters. The lesson is super low-key, but hits hard. Sometimes the messiest, most chaotic places are exactly where you finally figure out how to drop your guard and just breathe. The vibe shifts straight to the dark kitchen counter, where the tap pop open some cheap wine to basically ignore all the heavy trauma in the room. There is this chill beat playing in the background when she hits him with the ultimate question. Why is he so completely obsessed with taking pictures? Adrian freezes, his fork literally shaking, and drops this heavy confession. He says human life is a joke, people just vanish, and his camera is his only weapon to snatch a single second back from the universe. It is his absolute defense against the toxic people who try to gaslight and rewrite history. The truth hitting us right here is absolutely massive. You can never, ever let someone else hold the pen when it comes to writing your own story, because they will always try to write you out completely. The camera zooms right in on Elena as Adrian starts poking at her absolute worst scars. He asks what her big master plan was before all this trauma hijacked her life. And the irony is just sick, guys. She originally wanted to be a prosecutor, to lock up the exact same type of mafia monsters she ended up dating. Victor totally brainwashed her into thinking her pure love could actually fix a certified psychopath. She starts tearing herself apart, calling herself a total idiot. But Adrian instantly shuts that down. He leans in and completely flips the script, calling her supposed stupidity a massive, beautiful kind of optimism. He forces her to look at the titanium spine she built. Remember this life lesson. Your pain is never a total waste if you use it to level up and learn how to survive the worst. Let us break down this frame together, because we are looking at the absolute grind of bouncing back from literal psychological warfare. Elena finally crashes on his beat-up couch, and you can see the defensive armor literally fall off her shoulders. This dark little apartment doesn't have any of Victor's insane security cameras or mind games. Adrian grabs this dusty old photo album and sits down, keeping the exact perfect distance close enough to have her back, but far enough to not trigger her defenses. He flips the book open straight to the wreckage of his own blown-up engagement. It is a massive flex of trust. The core lesson here is straight up unavoidable. If you really want a real connection, you have to be willing to step right into the dangerous blast zone of someone else's messy past. The camera locks onto these old glossy photos, and the clash between his past and present is absolutely wild. We see a younger Adrian with his ex Katie, both looking stupidly happy and bulletproof. Elena is squinting at him like he is crazy. Why on earth would you drag the ghost of your dead relationship into this room? His answer completely flips the energy. He quietly admits their last year together was an absolute psychological war zone. But get this, he straight up refuses to let their toxic ending ruin the memory of the good days. He traces the photo, totally separating the real love they had from the absolute train wreck it turned into. The lesson hits like a truck, just because Something ends in a massive disaster doesn't mean the awesome beginning was a fake story. Adrian drops a truth bomb that totally shatters Elena's whole perspective on her trauma. He tells her straight up that just because a bridge burned down doesn't mean crossing it was a mistake. He completely reframes her dark years with the mob boss as a brutal but totally necessary training arc. Victor was nothing but a fake, a parasite leeching off her good heart because he didn't have one. This massive plot twist hits her so hard, she actually lets out this crazy, tearful laugh. Adrian just locks eyes with her and drops the hardest line, yet leveling up and outgrowing the villains who try to break us is just nature taking its course. Here is the ultimate takeaway, bro. The absolute worst, most brutal chapters of your life are usually the exact things that forge your highest level armor. You and I have totally seen this kind of breaking point before. When your whole world gets nuked, you have to dig through the absolute ruins of your own mind. The camera follows Elena as she finally bridges the gap, shaking while she thanks him for looking at her absolute mess of a life without running away. The rain is smashing the windows, making the whole room feel completely locked down. Then, boom, her emotional walls just completely collapse. She admits she is terrified. Her baggage is going to poison this new dynamic, but Adrian holds the line. Her chai isn't broken, she is just detoxing from the villain's poison. He matches her fear with his own, admitting he's terrified of just being a rebound. Always remember this. Dragging your ugliest fears out into the open is the only way to destroy them. Listen up, guys. This right here is absolute cinema. Adrian straight up confesses he is terrified of just being a boring rebound after the hurricane she just survived. But Elena totally obliterates that doubt. She leans in, dropping the wildest truth bomb. Sitting next to him makes her want to smash her armor to pieces. The camera locks onto her shaking hand as she reaches out and rests her fingers over his. Total victory. In one move, she completely destroys the empty puppet role she played in Victor and his twisted games. Adrian reads the room, moving in incredibly slow to give her an out, but she stays totally planted. Taking a chance on trust feels exactly like jumping without a parachute, but it is the only real wake up and actually start living again. Adrian finally closes that agony gap, resting his forehead against hers and completely burning down any idea of them just being casual friends. As they melt into this embrace, you can literally feel the rusted chains snapping in Elena and her mind. Guys, she is not having a breakdown. She is using a crowbar to pry open a vault she welded shut just to survive her brutal ex. The contrast is totally wild. Life with Victor was a non-stop psychological blood sport. But right here, in this dim room, it is just two damaged heavyweights putting their ugliest secrets on the table. They stay glued to that couch past midnight, navigating the terrifying maze of basic human trust. Look, the quietest, softest moments in our lives always demand the absolute most savage levels of quiet courage. Stick with me here, because this is the exact frame where the ghost of her massive trauma bond gets totally reduced to ash. No dramatic movie vows here. They just share that incredibly fragile space. Adrian walks her out into the rain, his hand lingering on her arm with this quiet panic, asking her to text him when she is safe. As Elena steps into the dock, that suffocating dread gets replaced by an unhinged, terrifying hope. Earlier, she demanded proof this would not blow up in her face. His answer was a sad smile and zero evidence. Just a wild choice to believe in her. Her past was basically a hostage negotiation. This new bond is a blind leap off a massive cliff. Taking that raw leap of faith without a safety net is exactly how you finally smash your heaviest chains. Let us pause the video right here, you and I. Take a hard look at Elena. For the first time in forever, she wakes up because she actually wants to be alive, not because she is terrified of sleeping in and making the boss angry. We get this awesome montage of normal stuff. Chugging black coffee, walking down basic streets, letting friends without a care in the world. Cheech traded the rich cage of Victor mob empire for a tiny, sunny apartment that is 100% hers. The truth here is painfully simple, but it takes forever to learn. Real healing does not drop in with epic background music or an explosive boss fight victory. It sneaks in as this incredibly boring, ordinary piece that your wrecked brain finally realizes is actually safe. Now, watch the camera slide over to Adrian, just chilling in the background. No massive villain speeches here, it's just the smooth click of his camera. He catches her in those fast seconds when her survivor mask slips, showing the real girl finally learning how to breathe. She jokes that he is a stalker, but he just sees the wild tragedy of her healing arc. Fast forward 3 months, and the vibe flips. Her buddy Ops calls, dropping a massive bombshell that sucks the air out of the room. Victor,
the arrogant mob boss who ruined her, has completely tanked his own shiny empire. His downfall is incredibly public and absolute. The takeaway here is brutal, but completely true.
People who treat human beings like shiny little trophies will always end up smashing absolutely everything they touch. This is exactly where the plot pulls a totally unhinged twist. You expect her to pull a wicked smirk or cue the epic revenge music. Nope, she is just chilling in a sunny room. She waits for that spicy hit of bitter payback, but all she gets is complete radio silence in her head. Watching Victor crash and burn, she feels nothing but icy pity for a pathetic stranger. The guy is frantically pulling strings from miles away, begging for her attention. Elena just looks at the raw photos on her desk and calmly tells Marcus to send the guy 3 devastating words. Tell him I am fine. This right here is absolute peak realization. Real boss energy is not screaming your victory from the rooftops. It is that incredible piece of straight up not caring what your old enemy has to say anymore. Cut to the street, 2 excruciating days later. The shadows are literally eating Victor alive. The supreme king who ran her universe is pacing the sidewalk, completely shaking and desperate. The dude is utterly washed. Up high, Elena spots him from a window. She strolls down to the pavement, her boots clicking like a crazy countdown timer on his ruined life. He tries to play it cool with jokes, but his voice cracks under the insane irony of it all. She just stands there totally iced out, an absolute fortress refusing to budge an inch. Write this down, because it hits hard. When the scary smoke finally clear out, the massive monsters that used to keep you awake are usually just pathetic, totally exhausted, and incredibly broken dudes holding on to absolutely nothing. The camera zooms right in on the wreckage. Watching you almighty Victor squirm and gulp for air is wildly uncomfortable. He admits his biggest villain flaw, confessing he cycles through victims playing the exact same toxic games. His eyes are brimming with tears, begging her to save him. He frantically swears he will become the ultimate hero she always wanted. But look at Elena, her face is a literal block of ice. Without blinking, she totally drops him. She whispers that the perfect version of him was always Faye Ike, just a desperate coping mechanism she invented to survive his garbage. Let this brutal reality check sink in. Wishing someone will magically fix themselves never works. You absolutely cannot fall for fake potential when the real them is actively tearing your life completely apart. Watch Victor shake as he drops his most pathetic move, asking if another guy took his spot. Elena goes for the nuclear option of pure truth. She admits there is someone else, making it clear her glow-up is 100% her own doing. The villain energy drains out of his face. He frantically offers her the freedom he kept locked away for 7 brutal years. It is honestly embarrassing. Her stare cuts through his empty chest. "You had 84 months to figure out my worth," she states with zero chill, refusing to pause her life for his fake redemption. Grab this lesson right now. An apology from a control freak who just realized his cage is completely empty is never actually real. It is just a pathetic negotiation from a dude who lost his favorite toy. Pay close attention to this final shot. What you see is the legendary funeral of who Elena used to be. Losing his mind, Victor pulls a pathetic villain meltdown, screaming that he loves her. Elena turns around and drops the heaviest truth bomb of their cursed history. She tells him love without a drop of basic respect is just loud, annoying noise. He never loved her. He just loved the shiny mirror she held up to make his ego look massive. She walks away, leaving him to rot in his own empty darkness. You and I really need to take this to heart. Finding actual peace means you have to completely ditch that comfortable, toxic drama you used to live in, just so you can finally enjoy the beautiful, absolute quiet of a perfectly normal life. Freeze the frame right on the exact second her massive trauma bond totally shatters. Elena turns her back on the absolute tyrant who used to micromanage her oxygen supply. When Victor plays the wounded victim and asks about the new guy, she casually drops that Adrian actually treats her like a human being. Total fatality. Victor tries to pull off one last guilt trip, but as she watches his expensive black car roll away, she does not shed a single tear, no falling to her knees in the rain. The sick curses is broken, replaced by an insane wave of pure relief. Here is the ultimate truth drop, guys. Real closure is not some dramatic, tearful hug after a massive final showdown. True closure is literally just that random, boring Tuesday when you totally forget that toxic person even exists. Like the universe is by director, her phone buzzes the exact millisecond Victor disappears. It is Adrian, no mind games, no hidden tests, just flawless timing. He casually offers to come over and cook dinner. Cut to her cozy kitchen. She is chopping veggies and you can actually hear her humming. The place is packed with cheap furniture, but it is a boss kingdom she built from scratch. When Adrian walks in, the air does not freeze up. There is zero toxic power struggle, just 2 relaxed people, completely stoked to be sharing the room. Lock this final lesson into your brain right now. Real emotional safety is never built on million-dollar gifts, threats, or insane Mafia flexes. It completely thrives in the quiet, extremely basic, perfectly ordinary moments of absolute zero drama. Guys, look at this absolute power move. Adrian brings basic grocery store daisies. Her toxic ex-Victor used to literally drown her in huge red roses just to flex his dirty money. But Adrian, his flowers actually let her breathe. They are sitting at this scratch table, knees bumping, and the tension is wild. Adrian drops the ultimate plot twist. He wants her to be the literal face of his new gallery exhibit. He sees a total boss who crawled out of the gutter. She is completely shook, thinking she is too damaged for the spotlight. But look, here is the real-life lesson. Sometimes your past trauma messes with your vision so hard, you need a real partner to hold up a mirror and show you that your survival scars are actually your biggest flex. Look at the sincerity on this guy. Adrian looks her dead in the eyes and calls her the most complex person alive. After years getting your soul sucked dry by an emotional vampire like Victor, letting someone see the real you is terrifying. Her instincts are screaming to run and hide. But plot twist, she takes a breath and actually says yes. They are pouring cheap wine, and those titanium walls she built are completely melting. She is unlocking her old self, digging up dreams she buried when she was practically a hostage. She is finally taking back that main character energy, and it is absolute fire. The life lesson today is simple. Real healing does not start when the bad guy loses. It kicks off the exact second you realize your own story is actually worth telling. Let's unpack this together, you and I. Elena is totally off the leash right now. She could just vanish off the grid. But honestly, total freedom is terrifying when you have been locked up by a mob boss for years. Notice the pro move Adrian pulls here. He does not rush her. He just grabs her shaking hand and tells her to take it slow. Fast forward, they are chilling on the sofa and the vibe is immaculate. And she rests her head on him and get this, no panic attacks, no waiting for a trap, just pure calm. And then she drops the bomb, telling him she is falling in love. No toxic drama, just real talk. The life lesson is simple here. A genuine connection is only going to survive if you build it in a place where nobody is constantly sleeping with one eye open. Watch her tense up right here. She is bracing for impact, expecting him to laugh because her ex trained her to expect pure cruelty. But plot twist, Adrian just smiles. He drops a massive revelation, admitting he fell for her months ago. Remember that crazy night she smashed us? A wine glass. He saw that Rup's explosive rage and realized she was breaking out of her twisted cage. He kept his mouth shut the entire time just so she could heal on her own terms. Compare that massive green flag to Victor, always demanding total submission. When they kiss, the energy in the room is just unreal. Here is your life lesson for the day. True loyalty means someone is willing to swallow their own desires and hide their feelings just to protect your fragile healing process. Pay close attention. Expect a cheesy movie speech. But no, they skip the toxic drama. Instead, they silently agree to stop fighting wars and start protecting each other. Boom. Time skipped 6 months later. Look at Elena standing there like an absolute boss on the deck of a sailboat she bought with her own cash. The dirty city where Victor tortured her is fading into the fog behind them. Adrian is just chilling in the back, snapping photos, in awe of how happy she looks now. She is vibing in the sea breeze, 100% free from the Mafia nightmare. It's an insane glow up. The life lesson here is deep. If you really want to lock down your own peace of mind, you have to be crazy enough to sail completely off the edge of your old map. We jump straight into this gritty legal clinic, and Elena is locked in. You guys, she is weaponizing her own trauma. Every sick mind game Victor played on her is now her personal cheat code to help other victims escape the mob life. She knows exactly how these monsters operate because she beat the final boss. Then we cut to Adrian showcasing his gallery. The photos are not some edgy trauma dump. They are just her living her best life. Cooking, chilling, totally relaxed. That stiff, terrified posture she used to have. Entirely gone. She is not waiting for a hitman to kick the door down anymore. It is a massive character arc, which brings us to the life lesson. Your darkest, most brutal scars usually turn out to be the absolute sharpest weapons in your entire survival inventory. Stick with me here, because we need to pause and break this down. Elena is looking at her photos, amazed at how fearless she looks. Adrian says he just captured the boss she already was. But then, boom, her phone blows up. It is a text saying Victor has trapped a new victim at his club. Normally this is where the main character snaps and goes on a massive revenge rampage, right? But watch her face. Nothing. Absolutely zero reaction. No rage, no screaming, just a totally cold shrug. This is the ultimate slap in the face to a toxic narcissist like Victor. She literally does not care anymore. The life Len here is absolute fire. True freedom from your enemies is not getting loud revenge. It is reaching that freezing cold indifference where you forget they even exist. Watch this absolute freezing cold move. She types a polite reply, hits send, and tosses the phone away. Zero stress. We cut back them, chilling on the boat under this insane golden hour light. Guys, this is what an actual healthy power couple looks like. They are two bosses holding their own, not toxic parasites feeding off each other. Adrian to keep the boat out longer, just watching the sunset. Looking into the dark water, she thinks about that terrified hostage she used to be back in Victor's mansion. It is a wild reality check.
'Cause sometimes love feels like losing everything. The lesson is heavy but true. Sometimes you have to completely incinerate a weak version.
Just to give your upgraded self the space to breathe and take control. You have to appreciate the twisted irony right now. People look at a destroyed relationship and call it a fail. But let us be real, Victor basically handed her the ultimate upgrade. That absolute monster burned away the weak, naive girl she used to be, forcing her to build a backbone out of pure titanium. We jump to their kitchen, totally relaxed. She is deep into her legal files while Adrian is prepping dinner. The vibe is flawlessly calm. But then bam, plot twist incoming. Adrian dreamt the news that he just booked a massive art show in New York. The universe loves to play games, which brings us to the life lesson. Right when you think you have finally unlocked a peaceful life, fate will throw a test your way, just to see if your new foundation is bulletproof or just a fragile illusion. Look at the sheer panic hitting Adrian right now. He is absolutely sweating, terrified that leaving her alone for a few weeks is going to ruin everything they built. But Elena shuts that down immediately. She looks him dead in the eye and tells him to pack his gear. Back in her Mafia days, Vector walking the door meant she was about to get punished. Now, she is literally pushing Adrian toward that flight. She drops the truth, saying that grinding on their own goals is what actually makes them untouchable. You can see the relief wash over him. She even jokes about flying out later to see him flex his art. This leaves us with a massive life lesson. A real partner will hype you up to conquer the world. While a toxic warden is just terrified, you might realize the cage door is unlocked. Guys, catch this tiny shift in her face right here. This is the exact second the final chain breaks, where she realizes if her toxic ex was standing there, he would have sabotaged that gallery stove just to keep her trapped. Victor, any success he could not take credit for. But Adrian, he just wants her to shine without trying to own her soul. The scene cuts to her awake in their dark bedroom, listening to him breathe. And get this, for the first time ever, she is not waiting for an ambush. The midnight panic attacks are officially cancelled. She finally understands the hardest rule of the survival game. Here is the life lesson. You can never build your safe house on someone's turf, because they will always change the locks. You absolutely have to lay your own bricks and own the deed yourself. You and I are going to look at this together and decide. Here is the raw truth of the story. Victor was just the ugly wrecking ball proving her old life was rotting away. Adrian was the safe zone she needed to crash in, but the actual insane grind? That was entirely Elena. She completely destroyed the victim mindset. We jump 3 months ahead, straight into the blinding lights of the New York gallery, showing these massive photos of her survival. Adrian walks up and asks about this one shot where she is laughing uncontrollably. Elena just flashes this wildly peaceful smile. She officially beat the game. The final life lesson is crystal clear. The ultimate flex against a monster who tried to delete your existence is looking into the camera and finally recognizing you are bulletproof. Look at the absolute flex happening in this gallery right now. Elena is standing under the bright lights, watching absolute strangers sip their fancy wine while they dissect her worst nightmares. Adrian is ready to throw hands. He leans in, begging to rip every single canvas down if she gives the word. But her posture? Absolute titanium. She tells him to back off and let them stare. She wants everyone to see the wreckage of her past, proving that getting wrecked is never the final boss. She is dropping breadcrumbs for anyone else trapped in the dark. The lesson here is loud and clear. Even when somebody takes a wrecking ball to your reality, you can sweep up the dust, mix it with some grit, and build an absolute fortress from scratch. Hitting rock bottom is just the universe giving you a clean foundation. Notice the absolute power shift here as she completely hijacks her own narrative. The camera zooms in on her face as she addresses this room full of snobs. Her voice does not even shake. She drops the hammer, telling them that putting a shattered mind back together is an ugly, crooked nightmare. You do not just snap your fingers and magically heal. You bleed, you trip, and it is a miserable grind, but it is the only way out of the mud. Adrian stands off to the side, looking incredibly proud. He tells her she took pure nightmare fuel and forged it into gold. Later, chilling on a rooftop, the crazy plot twist really sinks in. Having her life nuked from orbit was the exact wake-up call she needed. We all want to hide in cozy lies, but the freezing, jagged truth is the only needle sharp enough to stitch a blown-apart heart back together. You and I are going to unpack this together because we have all fallen into this exact trap. Under the glowing skyline, Elena just freezes. Her brain is so wired for war that total peace feels like a sniper waiting in the trees. She admits that being happy is terrifying because she is just waiting for the next bomb to drop. Adrian tries to play the shiny hero, swearing nothing bad will touch her again. She instantly swats that garbage away. Realizing she is not buying the fairy tale, he drops the act. He admits that things will explode, but he will be standing in the rubble right next to her. That brutal honesty is what finally cracks her titanium armor. The biggest scam movies sell is that love magically fixes your damage. Real love is simply finding a partner who refuses to bail out when the ceiling caves in. Here is the absolute reality check. Healing is rarely some massive cinematic showdown. It is the exhausting daily grind of choosing not to burn your own world down. We get this sick montage. Elena goes back to classes. She grinds at the clinic. She builds an absolute fortress of loyal friends that her toxic ex can never penetrate. One solid year later, her screen lights up. An email from his lawyer. The divorce is officially inked. That is literally it. No screaming match in a thunderstorm, no dramatic standoff. A brutal, controlling marriage is just deleted into the trash bin by a couple of digital signatures. It is the wildest anticlimax ever. But the life lesson here hits hard. Your ultimate victory against a toxic past is calmly closing the laptop, ghosting the drama, and just walking away without a single glance back. Stick with me, because we need to hit pause. This is the exact frame where you expect the main character to lose her mind and start smashing plates. But look at Elena. The papers are signed. She is chilling in the sunlit cafe where she and Adrian first crossed paths. The camera pushes right in. Adrian asks why you're being so quiet. She turns to him with a completely exhausted but incredibly real smile. She whispers that she is finally off the leash. The heavy anchor is cut. She is no longer dragging a ticking time bomb of a marriage behind her. She is just breathing. We always hype up moving on as this loud, explosive victory lap. But the absolute truth of it is way quieter. True closure is not lighting a match and walking away from an explosion. It is just that silent, invisible moment where you realize that demons cannot touch you anymore. The director locks the camera on this cafe table. Elena sits across from the literal wall of a man who kept her grounded during a massive emotional hurricane. The lighting catches her hands shaking as she apologizes for being an absolute wreck. Now, pay attention to Adrian. He does not feed her some cheesy line about how perfect she is. He locks eyes and straight up says he would take her absolute chaos over fake perfection any day of the week. They step out onto the rainy street, totally aware that the road ahead is a brutal climb. Listen up, because the truth we pull from this is huge. Finding a real partner is never about tracking down someone with a squeaky clean record. It is about locking down the one person who will gladly sit in the mud with you and help unpack all your heavy baggage. For 7 straight years, Elena was basically a ghost. She was just a human meat shield for Victor, a guy so incredibly empty inside, he had to drain her life force just to keep a pulse. The second his psychos gripped, it looked like she was tripping. But a plot twist, guys. She was actually just pulling oxygen for the first time. The boss built his massive empire by forcing her to stay small, while Adrian simply gives her a safe house to exist in without faking a smile. It is brutal watching her cry over the absolute monster who ruined her. But the crazy lesson hiding inside this heavy drama is that getting stabbed in the back is sometimes a blessing. That betrayal acts like a scalpel. It completely slices through those toxic chains, leaving absolutely nothing but your hardcore, bulletproof, unapologetic self. Let Lester freeze the frame and check out her body language. Elena has completely dropped that hostage vibe. She is no longer shrinking into corners to keep a ticking time bomb of a husband from detonating. As she struts down the exact same turf Victor used to control, she radiates this heavy, boss-level defiance. The absolute joke here is that a parasite like Victor never actually had the juice to break her. He just fed on the insecurities she already had locked in her head. Watching her world burn down was a nightmare, but it slammed her onto concrete instead of letting her drown in his fake reality. The vital life lesson is bulletproof. Knowing your absolute worth is the ultimate cheat code. It builds a titanium wall around your mind that completely blocks out any toxic villain trying to hijack your life. As the screen finally cuts to black, the sheer weight of this payback story really hits home. Elena swapped out the suffocating terror of dating a psychopath for something wildly powerful. She found a team up built on hardcore truth. She is absolutely done playing the tragic victim in Victor's sick little game. Look at the way she carries herself now. She is calling all the shots. She actively picks the messy, unscripted reality of a legit partner, completely throwing out the fake, toxic adrenaline spikes she used to think were love. If we pull one massive takeaway from this absolute train wreck, let it be this: living as your truest self is always going to be a chaotic ride. But when you finally kick down the door and escape your cage, that raw, totally unedited freedom is the only medicine strong enough to fix you.